Hidden Gems, episode 50, podcast update number Nah, I'm just kidding. I should cut that shit.
I thought it was hysterical.
I was so good. I would have been good. All right. Fine.
Good outtake.
Hidden Gems, episode 50, audience choice. Welcome to Hidden Gems, a board game podcast where we review unusual, forgotten, and underappreciated board games. We're your hosts. My name is Chris.
I'm Jason.
Excuse me. I'm Bill.
Oh my.
Sorry. Mid-drink. Sorry. I'm Bill.
Jeez.
One more, Bill.
I'm Bill.
And I'm Cameron. Thanks for listening to our show.
All right.
Almost forgot how to do that.
We're back,
apparently.
folks. Is this
Smooth
thing
as
on?
silk. Smooth as silk.
All four of us are back.
Wow.
We
Got
don't
the
do
whole
this that
crew
often.
here. It's quite nice.
Yeah, it is good to be back. It's a
awesome.
little rusty start. We've been hemming and hawing for the last hour here, but I think we're ready to get rolling again.
I forgot my 360 camera to capture this.
Oh, man,
I'm
yeah.
feeling really bummed about that.
We thank you folks for being so patient with us as we have rested and recovered and just taking a little time for ourselves. I know that people have been getting a little antsy for the next episode, and we understand that, but we appreciate very much y'all giving us the time to mentally recover to be able to do this episode.
It was kind of an unexpected break, to be honest. It was just a perfect storm of events going on, many of which had to do with me.
It was. It was.
So I feel like I need to
Everyone had-
explain myself.
Yeah. Elaborate.
Yeah. Well, it was not all my fault, but I feel like you were gone for a long time, right?
I was on vacation
Yeah. Chris was on
in
vacation.
Florida, and the day I came back, you left.
Yeah.
We left on vacation. So we did another national park trip, which people are probably sick of hearing about by now. But we were in Colorado and Utah for a little while, for 2 weeks actually, because once you get out there, you might as well just make it worth it. So we did 6 national parks out there.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a long time traveling. We were ready to be home when we were done with that one.
And while you were gone, we played the board game national parks here and sent pictures to Jason
I
just
know.
so he would feel. You
I know, I appreciated that.
Yeah.
I have played that one. It's
We
pretty
played
good.
trekking.
Yeah, it's a simple one. It's like in the realm of, Catan, Ticket to Ride.
Oh yeah, it's light as a feather.
My kids love it. But yeah, so we did Great Sand Dunes, Mesa Verde, Arches, Canyonlands, Capitol Reef, and Black Canyon of the Gunnison. All very cool parks.
What
That's
great
awesome.
memories for your kids. I mean, that is so cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
And then
So-
your house flooded.
And then our house flooded. Actually, the house flooded before we left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So update on that front. So we had a pipe burst in our crawl space,
Oh,
which
gosh.
apparently burst 2 months before we found it. I don't go in my crawl space often.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't
But
like, wow,
looking
really
back,
high water bill.
yeah, looking back at our water bills, I can tell when it started. And yeah, just soaked the entire crawl space.
Oh,
So
gosh.
we've got it resolved now. Everything's dry. Everything's clear of fungus and all of that stuff. But
Talia told me that Jenny, your wife, saw steam coming out of the floor. Is that made up or is that for
that's made up.
real? Okay.
But so I went out on our back deck and I heard a weird noise, like a hissing noise. And I was like, that's strange. I don't normally hear a hissing noise on our back deck. So I turned around and there was this brown goo coming down the siding, only on the bottom half of the house.
Oh, God.
And I
Oh,
was
no.
like, that's not good. And so the backside of the siding had gotten so wet that it dripped down from behind the
Oh.
siding, like the tar paper residue or whatever.
gosh.
But it's all resolved now. On that note, though, not entirely related, but on that note, just to add to the craziness of like, what are we doing with our lives? We've been debating the idea of moving for a long time, at least 5 years. And things have gone back and forth and the pandemic hit and we met our neighbors and we really like them and we hung out with them for a long time. Anyway, every once in a while, I check around to see what's on the market. And while we were gone, a house popped up in a neighborhood that we had been looking at. Came back on Saturday. I went and saw it on Sunday. We put an offer in on Monday and it was accepted the same day.
Wow.
And then on Tuesday and Wednesday, I freaked out.
Yeah, absolutely.
But long story short, we are moving. And so that's been an adventure for the past couple of weeks, trying to figure all that out. And so that added to the craziness of getting back into doing this. So I think things are calming down
Yeah.
slowly, but appreciate everybody's patience while we do life things.
Well, I need you to move
So-
soon, man, because you put all your games in my game room and I can't even move in here. Like games to the ceiling in here. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, like you're mad about that.
Yeah. Jason's collection is what's causing the
It's
cramped
unwieldy,
space in
man.
here.
Look at this place. The game's all over the floor.
Well, the good news is he's also moving closer. So instead of being 30 minutes late, Jason's probably only going to be like 20
That's
minutes
right.
late. So
That's true.
Awesome.
That's true. I'll have less excuse now.
That's awesome. Bill, what's
Yeah.
been going on with you? Quick
Wow.
update.
Quick update. So you had a daughter graduate from American University and getting her master's degree. So
Oh,
where I
that's right.
Last weekend. Took a long 4-day weekend. Probably the highlight, other than the graduation, was we went to a putt-putt golf place. It was like a high-end putt-putt golf.
So glad you're mentioning this. This
Yeah.
sounds so cool. Yes, please. Yeah, describe this.
Like we it has 3 different courses inside. They have like high-end bars inside, and your caddy's a bartender, and so you can go around and play putt-putt golf. We did
I love this
the
idea.
art 9 holes, which was like had Andy Warhol in it, and some other stuff, and it was
Wow.
like a reproduction of you being in his Campbell soup, picture. We had a great time doing it, and Katie wore her regalia so she could get some good pictures, and then of course we went down to the mall and took pictures. But anyway, that was
I will
a good
tell
fun
you,
day.
the pictures from that putt-putt place, that place looked so cool.
It was really cool.
We are going next time we're in DC for sure. Do you remember what the name of it was?
I just texted, but your darn Indian burial ground house. I got no internet signal. I got no cell phone signal, so I can't ping the fan to find
called the
out. I'll
Puttery.
let you know.
The what?
The Puttery.
That's right.
The putter.
I looked it up. That's the only reason I know.
Oh, okay. That's it. Yeah, it was very cool.
That is awesome. That's good stuff.
So,
Cameron, talk about wood.
yeah,
Or
man.
babies.
I haven't done anything of any great significance other than spending a lot of wonderful time in my shop and a lot of wonderful time with my wife and my son. It seems like he learns new words every day and just having a fun time being dad. And maybe everyone in the audience doesn't know yet, but I'm having a little girl in
Yes, you
September.
are.
And my wife is having another. We are getting a little girl to be our daughter from my wife.
And now it's going to be a balanced house. I don't know what that's like because there's 3 to 1 in my
I-
house. Chris doesn't know.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Talia
boys.
doesn't know what
I
that's
never
like.
had any sisters, so I don't know what it's like to have little girls in the house.
Oh, it's
So it's
great,
gonna
man.
be a blast.
I guess I'm the
can't
only person.
wait.
Oh no, Bill.
Have to.
Yeah, Bill's all girls, but
Mhm.
yeah, can speak from experience. It's good.
We are absolutely thrilled and delighted. So yeah, September. All my kids get born in September, apparently. So,
Yep.
so that's life for us. Man.
January
I'm
is a
just-
dark month.
What's
Long nights.
Anyway, we're gonna move on from that topic.
Well, it took me a little while to do the math on that. Sorry.
So yeah, just enjoying my new career setup. Sometimes being on the computer, and most of the time being out in my woodworking shop. And yeah,
That's
life's
awesome.
good, man.
Well, Chris,
Cool.
what have you been up to?
Oh my gosh, guys. It feels like it's been forever since I've been on a show because I kind of have.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I have so many things banked to talk about. I've read so many good graphic novels. I've played a lot of cool video games, but I'm just going to save that for now because we actually have a pretty full show tonight. So I'm not going to go into any real big detail about things I've been doing like that.
I think it's notable to mention one particular video game that you have played recently.
Okay. We can talk about that. Okay. Twist my arm. I'll do it. I finished Tunic.
Ooh, wow.
Finally.
I know we have talked a lot about Tunic on the show. We'll talk about it again because as much as I hate to admit it, Jason was right.
What?
This game
Wait, what?
is great.
Wow.
Quick recap, if you're a new listener and you don't remember, Tunic is an isometric kind of top-down-ish sort of adventure game in the vein of Zelda.
Mhm.
But what's cool about this game is you find pages of the instruction manual, which is fashioned after an old NES manual,
Mhm.
slowly in the world that teaches you how to play the game once you figure out what the pages are trying to tell you because they're written in another language. There's so many things I could say about this game, but I will say probably the thing that I enjoyed the most were the secrets. This game has significant, meaningful treasure seeking, and there are a lot of them, and you have to search
Tons.
hard for them. It's very puzzly, but it is really satisfying when you figure something out, and there are so many cool things to discover.
It's hard to talk about it without giving things away.
Yeah.
It is, but I will say one thing. I think this must be mentioned. This is maybe a minor spoiler, so just brace yourself. It's not that uncommon now for video games to have more than one ending.
Mhm.
Sometimes they have 3 or 4, but there's like the good ending and the bad ending. This game has 2 endings. I won't tell you how they end, but I will tell you that one of them involves a pretty significant puzzle, and solving that was one of the coolest things I have ever done in a video game ever. Would you agree, Jason? Because I know you figured it out too.
I
Yeah.
would.
No, I
Did you
agree.
finish? You finished it.
I didn't finish it, but I'm on the path, we'll say, to finishing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you unlock something. And when I did it, as soon as I finished it, I was like, this is one of those video game moments I just will never forget. Because it was just so cool when it happened, for lack of a better word.
Very cool.
Good wreck,
That's cool.
Jason.
It was hard to talk about the game because I was trying to get people excited about it as I was talking about it originally, but I'm like, I can't talk about it really because if I do, it gives away the coolest moments of the game.
Yeah.
But
The game gives you subtle little clues that are just in your face throughout the game. And you're just not realizing
Once
it
you
until it all
understand them,
comes
you
together.
literally sit there for 5 seconds and just smack yourself in the face and go,
Oh, yeah.
how did I miss this?
And then you're just in awe of the designer and how clever he is. It's so good. So yeah, Tunic finished it.
That's awesome.
cool.
I'm just sitting here thinking about Jason sampling your Jason is Right segment there and how much we're going to hear that in the future.
I know.
Yeah.
That was one of the best moments in the history of this podcast for me. So.
Okay. Well, it is good to be back. One of the things that we always do, as you guys know on the shows, we drink a little cocktail.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight we got 3.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So Bill brought us the first one. Want to tell us about this one, Bill?
Yes, I do. I went through all kinds of things trying to think about something that is 50 themed. I started thinking about, well, what could I do that is back in like 70s that was popular back then or in the 1950s or whatever. And then I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go with everybody here likes bourbon.
Mhm.
I went with an old fashioned. So I went through Virginia on the way back from Washington, D.C., and they have some different choices of bourbon, but I ended up getting a Basil Hayden dark rye on the way back.
Nice,
from,
yeah.
Okay.
from Washington, D.C. And this particular old-fashioned has 2 teaspoons of simple syrup, 1 teaspoon water, 2 dashes of bitters, orange bitters, that is a Carolina cube, by the way, there for you,
Yeah,
Chris.
thanks. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
no,
Yeah.
make
I
sure-
appreciate that too.
Yeah, exactly.
Carolina Blue ice
Exactly,
cubes.
Carolina Blue too. So I wasn't going to say that until after you drank
Uh-huh.
it. 2 ounces of the bourbon and a burnt orange slice. So one of the things that took me a while to get it out here was trying to slice the orange peel, squeeze the orange peel, and burn it while it's on the way in because we
Okay.
realized about burning off my fingers and a maraschino cherry. But
It's delicious. Thank
It
you.
was. Mine is
Very
already
good.
gone.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
gone.
It's fantastic.
I left it out there in case 3 is not enough. We could have a 4.
All right. Well, let's get into the games. The video games.
Oh, not yet.
Oh, I
Yeah.
couldn't update my notes. That was going to be such a great transition.
Save it. Save it.
And that's my transition, man.
All right. Get the prize music going here. Do we
Oh,
have
yeah.
like a game show music going? Because we're getting ready to go into our much talked about, long anticipated Strasbourg giveaway.
Yeah, how long have we been talking about this?
So, for those of you that don't know, Strasbourg is a game that
It's
we
great.
reviewed very early on in this podcast, I believe.
It was like episode 2 or 3.
Yeah, it's very early on. It happens to also be Chris's, I think, favorite game.
It's my number 1, baby.
Number 1. Chris acquired a second copy with the intent of giving it away on the show at some point.
Yeah.
And-
Through Instagram, but I couldn't figure out how to do it. It's just too complicated.
That's right. So we've come up with a way to do it. We want to do it on this episode, and we've been talking about this. If you contributed to our geek list over at BGG, which is a list that Eudora and some others have put together. If you've contributed to that list by recommending a game, by voting on a game, by commenting on a game,
Yep.
if you've taken any of those actions, we've automatically entered you as a contestant
Yep.
for a drawing to win this copy of Strasbourg.
Yes.
We are
The very difficult to acquire Strasbourg.
right.
I'm telling you, you will pay at least $100 for this game on the secondhand market. It's not easy to get, and we're fully covering shipping, including international. So,
there you go.
big gift here.
Chris is covering shipping.
I am. This is on me, people.
So here's how this is gonna work. All right. So we had, remind me the number, 160 something.
161.
161 entries who are eligible to win this. There wasn't any sort of bonuses for contributing more than once or
No.
anything like that.
Which, can I just say, too, isn't that awesome? We had 161 people
That
is
recommend hidden gems or comment or at least,
I'm surprised that
give
we have
support.
161 listeners,
I know, it's
let
crazy.
alone members of our guild or people that would contribute to our geek list. It's amazing. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
So what we're going to do is Chris has put in a lot of legwork here. He's
Yep.
divided all of 61 of those names into 20 different groups.
20 groups.
And what is that, 8 or 9
Eight names per group.
per group. So I'm going to roll 2 dice.
Or roll the d20 first.
Right. The first dice is going to be a d20, which will identify the group, and then I will roll a d8 to select one name from that list.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
That's what's going to happen. I'm going to do it right now. Here, I'm shaking up the d20.
Right.
It's been a long time since I've rolled a d20, and that's
why I gave you the
sad
honor.
for me.
For
Thank
legal
you, Chris.
purposes, I'm videotaping.
We're videoing.
Okay.
It is not rigged.
We have number 10.
Number 10. Can I read the names?
Yeah, I feel like you should-
yes, let's-
you need to read the names.
let's
first.
Just
read the
to
names for
torture
number
the other
10.
people that don't win here.
That's right.
All right. Group number 10. B. Snyder 788. Dark Ace 78. Legopolis. Tim Bovalander. Daniel Wallen. That's the game table, I think. George W. George without an E. Law Trey Salt. And Cameron Hawkins.
All right.
Hey.
So those are
Hopefully, all those people still listen to our podcast. But you know,
our lucky contestants in group number 10. I'm
Right.
now going to roll this d8.
Here it comes.
Number 1.
B. Snyder
B.
788.
788. Congratulations, B.
Nice.
Snyder. 788.
congratulations.
Finally get this game out of my house.
That's right. That's right. The proud new owner of a copy of Strasbourg.
Yes.
We hope you enjoy it, B. Snyder 788. Thank you for contributing to the Geek List. And thank you to everyone else who contributes to the Guild, who listens to the show.
Yep.
This is our way of trying to say thanks and that we appreciate you. This episode is to serve that purpose as well.
Yep.
Speaking of those contributions, I feel like it'd be notable to announce we don't talk about stats on the show a
No,
lot,
not a lot.
right? But I'm pretty excited because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's possible that with our 50th episode, we might also hit 50,000 downloads,
Yes.
This is amazing.
which is a pretty cool number to hit.
Yeah,
Crazy.
So excited about that.
That's a big number.
it is.
And now, along those same lines, we actually pulled together a couple of other stats. And we're not going to bore you guys with this stuff for too long, but I thought a couple of these were pretty interesting. So in addition to our total download count being near 50,000, which is pretty awesome, I wanted to point out our most popular episode happens to be episode number 33.
It's Tom Vassell.
Tom
isn't it?
Vassel's most infamous reviews.
Still hasn't listened to our podcast.
Oh,
Yeah,
funny.
at the time that we collected this stat, there were 1,379 downloads of that one.
Nice.
The runner-up, so the second most popular episode, is 31, Forgotten Felds with Neat and Nerdy.
Oh, yeah. Which we need to have Mitch back on the show.
So we
which is
peaked around
awesome.
20 episodes ago.
Right.
I don't know what that says.
Our least popular episode, this one is not a surprise, Hungarian Tarok and other card games.
Well, we really screwed up with the naming on that one.
That one has 705.
Wow.
That's interesting to me. Okay, so there's not that big of a difference actually between. Well, it's almost double, but people still listen to that episode. Is my point. So that's pretty cool. And there's good stuff in that episode. We talk about Bargain Hunter in that one, which is a great game.
Yeah, a fun card game.
So,
But Mike Baglio was in that episode, so
well,
you could
know,
pass
yeah.
it. Maybe.
He pulled us down.
He kind of ruined it, honestly.
Oh,
What were
my
we
God.
thinking?
So
Mike.
that's fun stuff.
All right, one more quick little announcement. We want to take a moment to thank our Patreons, our Patreon backers. As always, we have a few, and we appreciate you all. And just to give a little teaser for our backers to know what we're going to be talking about, or if you're considering becoming a backer, getting access to our Backstage podcast. This Backstage episode, we're going to be talking about the old classic game, Wiz War, also
Yes.
known as Games Not to Play with Bill Arney.
Come on. I'm ready for the next game.
Chasing me through the dungeon like a rabid animal. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Wiz War and how much I hate Bill, then become a Patreon backer.
It's just one of my favorite games. It's better than Strasbourg for sure.
Bill got real excited after we played that one.
It was. Like my 70s
Where do you
all
get
came
this
roaring
one?
back.
All right. Well, because it has been so long since we've been back on the air, we thought we would do something a little bit different
Yep.
and just add a little bit of extra content to this episode. If you're not interested in this at all, you can skip ahead to the board games. But we thought it might be fun to spend a little bit of time before we talked about the board games to talk about some video games. And we're going to do that in the style of top 10 lists.
Yes.
So I know that each of us interpreted top 10 lists slightly differently.
Absolutely.
So we are going to still do it in the traditional, everybody lists their 10th and then their 9th and so
Yeah.
on. But I think Chris might be the only one who actually ranked his.
I guess so. I figured a top 10 list is pretty self-explanatory. Bill wrote like an autobiographical tale of his entire
I have
youth.
8 pages here. So here, this is how it was announced to us. Chris sends us a text that says, "Hey, let's do a top 10 video." Video game thing. Which I mean, to me, there's like 17 different questions I have in my mind because there's like, what's a video game definition? Is it a console? Is it a computer game? Is it an arcade? I mean, how do you want to narrow this down?
What is a video game, Bill? Let's talk about it existentially.
Yeah, exactly, because it's like, do I need to narrow that down? And that's like, no, I'm not going to ask him that because then he's going to tell me what it is. And then I thought, well,
So this is like
it the best game I played at the time, or was it because it had the biggest impact on me personally, or was it because it was pivotal to the industry at the time? I mean, what is the criteria that you need to decide whether it's in his? But
So
I thought
you
I'm
will
not going to
Bill.
ask Chris this
you went with
question.
the ask for forgiveness rather than
Exactly.
ask
Well,
for
Bill.
permission.
Yeah, so instead of asking Chris, Bill just did all of them.
I
So Bill actually has 6 top 10 lists.
did.
We're going to
Truly.
spare you all from that.
Right.
But I do think you make a good point, and I do think before we go into our list, before we say our number 10, you should just briefly, Bill, give a general idea of why you picked what you picked and why, if you rank them, which why wouldn't you? But, you know, if you rank them from 10 to 1, why you put them in the order that you did.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Okay.
So my last one was it at Stonemeyer that was the ones that said the top 101 games you must play before you die.
Oh, no, that was
what's
Mike
that
Selinker.
Mike Selinker. That's
Yeah.
it. So I have that flavor in here too.
Well, I will say quickly before we get into the list, I'm super pumped you're going to be a part of this, Bill, because I do think you'll bring a different perspective to this list because we always joke a little bit about it, but you are a little bit older than us. And so
15 minutes.
the three of us, Jason, Cameron, and I think are more to the console age. You know, we were young when the Nintendo and the Super Nintendo were hitting the scene, whereas I think your generation got more heavily into the PC gaming.
That's
It's,
chapter 1, 2, and 3 of my novel here. So yeah, I'll be getting into that, Chris.
Okay, great. Can't wait to hear about
You
it.
can save the rest of your notes for NaNoWriMo, that Nano Novel Writing Month.
Okay, that's awesome. All right, well, I think we should start with Jason, and we'll end with Bill, because
Okay.
he's the elder statesman. Plus, he can also kind of see how we're doing it. So, that,
Oh my gosh. Okay.
so we're going to set a precedent here, Bill. Okay, you ready?
I got to get rid of my first 7 pages. I'm sorry.
All right, so I will preface my list by saying, and this applies to pretty much my whole list, is that A, it's going to be pretty Nintendo heavy,
Okay.
because I was a Nintendo pretty much only
Yeah.
console guy growing up. A little bit of PC gaming in there, but also my focus here is less on ranking top 10 games of all time and more focused on like what were the top 10 most influential games to me
Mhm.
over time.
Mm-hmm.
So my first goes way back as far as I can remember in video gaming. And a lot of that is because like if I listed top 10 games, it would be a lot of really boring games that everybody knows. Right?
Yeah.
Super Mario 64, Mario Kart 64, right? Like all these games that are fantastic games in and of themselves, but are not going to be interesting to people. So
Yeah.
I don't know if this list will be interesting to people either way, but I wanted to try to pull out a couple things that might be a little less everybody's top 10 list, right? So
Hidden gems, if you will.
they're not all hidden
Jason
gems for
is my
sure.
spirit animal. I'm just going to say.
That's awesome.
So sorry, I ruined it for everybody
That's
and,
good.
and validated Bill's approach.
Remember, can you sample that now that Jason is right?
So anyway, with all that said, I'm going all the way back to the Commodore 64
Wow.
for the first one here
Okay.
with a little known title called Ducks Ahoy. Does anybody know this game?
Never heard of it.
Don't know this
Oh,
one.
wait, that's not the ones you shoot at.
That's
No,
Duck
you,
Hunt.
no, you don't
Okay.
shoot the ducks. You save the
That's
ducks.
Nintendo,
Actually.
Bill. Come
Okay,
on.
right. Thanks.
So the very first gaming console I can remember is the Commodore 64. Playing this thing, this big chunky keyboard box.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ducks Ahoy. So it takes place in Venice, I guess, and there are 9 houses on the screen in like a 3x3 grid, and you see ducks in the top of the houses, and they're walking down the steps and they're walking towards the door. But when they get to the door, when they get to the front door, they jump in the water, and there's a crocodile going around. So you have a boat, and your goal is to sail around to the front of each of the houses and try to catch the ducks before they jump in
Okay.
the water and take them to the beach. This is Ducks Ahoy. It's fantastic.
Sounds like a great one.
Oh my
I never said that my top 10 list was full of truly amazing games, but it was an amazing game to me when I was 5.
That's awesome.
So that's Ducks Ahoy
Ducks
on
Ahoy.
the
I
Commodore
love it.
64. You can find emulators for the Commodore 64, and there is one out there for this game. So
That's awesome.
if you'd like to try it,
That's
Great
it is
pick.
possible.
Right. So yeah, my approach was very similar. I basically tried to think back through my, sort of life of video gaming and tried to think of games that, like, at the time I put in a lot of hours. I really
Mhm.
enjoyed it. If I could have this set up right now, I would definitely start a new game and enjoy it. So that's kind of what I did.
Yep.
All right. Number 10, Final Fantasy Tactics.
Oh, yes.
I loved this game.
This
because
is a great game.
It was a different take on the old style of RPG because it had the whole, like, 3-dimensional isometric
Yep.
grid
Square
thing.
grid.
It's
yeah.
still turn-based, but you had to consider movement in all sort of dimensions, including the Z-axis, because
Yeah.
the terrain actually elevated.
Yeah. You can get
Um,
up in a tree.
Yeah, and this was on the
Mm.
PlayStation, the original PlayStation. And it had more to offer, I felt like, than some of the other RPGs that I had played at the time.
Yeah.
And really difficult, actually.
Very difficult. And your party members can die
Can actually die.
permanently.
You have to, like, recruit randos off the street and then train them up from basically nothing.
Yeah. I remember I played this game and I was probably like 5 hours in and I had a party member, Buster,
Uh-huh.
and Buster died.
Right.
And I restarted the game.
Oh
I was
my
like,
gosh.
Buster can't freaking die.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that could happen.
Right.
But yeah, it's so good.
You mean roguelike?
But it's not roguelike. It's
Chris
an
made it
RPG.
roguelike by
I
restarting the
guess
game every time.
Well, I guess I get what you're saying. Yes. I made it roguelike. Yes.
Yeah, so there you go. Final Fantasy Tactics, number 10.
Very nice.
Mm.
All right. I'll echo what you guys said. To me, these aren't the 10 greatest games of all time. According to people, they're my 10 favorite games. They're not necessarily graphically the best or technically the best, but they're the games that are most memorable to me, that had the biggest impact on me. I'm putting this game at number 10 because there's probably a little bit of recency bias here. This game could go up or down over time, but I just talked about it's Tunic.
Wow.
It
Nice.
has to be in my top 10. It was so freaking good. I'm hesitant to put it higher than that because it's so new,
Mm-hmm.
but I am telling you, this game is dang good. And I've already talked about it, so I won't talk about it any longer for the sake of time. But man, Tunic is a gem.
I figured that was going to be on somebody's list, so
Right.
I left it off mine in the honorable mention category. It's definitely up there.
I'm glad you went short, so that gives me a little more
No,
time.
Bill.
So I graduated in 1981. Around that time, Star Wars came out in 1977, Indiana Jones in 1981, and Tron was 1982, just to give you the setting of what was going on around that time. The Apple II, which was first sold in 1977, I got one in 1980. D&D, by the way, came out in 1974, and I got the first box set around 1981. So this is the environment that I am in when the games are coming out. So I also worked at the computer lab at Western Carolina University when I was 15, and I was first exposed to games down there, which was ASCII golf, right? Where you type in on the thing with words what golf club you're using. Or there was a Star Trek one, which I played more, which I won't go into it, but you basically typed in the words. The first one that actually seemed like it was a game that actually had any kind of video component was Rogue. And so I put it down here, but basically you would see your screen appear with periods as places on the floor that you haven't gone. The sides of the walls were like equals or dashes on the way
yeah,
down.
okay.
And so you would go around, and you had a dog that would go around with you, right? But that was kind of, when you say things are roguelike, it's referring to that game that was back there at the very
No way.
Yeah. So
Huh.
that was when it was
I
called
did not
Rogue.
realize that that's what that meant.
Yeah. And
Okay.
when you died, you're permanently died.
So the game is called Rogue.
It was called Rogue.
Mhm.
You had
Okay.
a dog, by the way. And if you wanted to get really deep, you needed to keep your dog alive because your dog could kick ass later. And he got better than when he was early. He was, I don't know, pocket dog. Sorry. Something. So I will skip some of this other stuff in there about the early Apple II games that I love, like Dr. J versus Very Bird. That's when I first got my Zork game, by the way, back
You,
then.
you got to pick one, Bill.
I know it. I'm getting there. I won't go
Oh,
into
Rogue
big-
is not your number 10?
No, it's not.
Oh my gosh, Bill. Okay.
I'm getting there really quick.
That was
Sorry.
your honorable
Nope, that's
mention.
Bill's
No,
10.
it's not. This is
Moving
kind of
on.
our-
Number 9.
Right. I'm going to do this because I kind of want to lay a foundation. We may talk about other games that have these roots because I played a bunch of adventure games, and I don't really play those anymore because I kind of got them out of my system. But King's Quest came out, Grim Fandango, Full Throttle. I mean, I'm guessing there's a lot.
I know those. You're talking about the LucasArts games.
Yeah, and Ultima. I mean, those were one of those really early ones. A lot of those are at Abandonia. So anyway, I will now get to my first Top Gun games.
Thank goodness.
So these are really a whole lot like electronic board games because they were turn-based because you didn't have the computer power to do things. And this is where I really got excited about games. So my very first one, and it actually started on a mainframe, was called Empire. And it had a capital T and a little t, and basically it was kind of global domination, where you moved your units all the way around a bunch of islands, had transports and infantry and tanks and battleships and whatever. But the one that I played a lot, I could play on the Apple, was Empire Deluxe, and it really holds up. Honorable mentions for the category. A Perfect General 2 and Panzer General. So that's how I'm going to do it. So anyway, that's
Bill
my
has
number one.
successfully mentioned 18 games.
I
That
did,
is
I
number
just
10.
wanted-
Yeah, so which one of those 20 games was your number 10?
Empire. That sets the stage for the rest of my 10.
All right,
Anyway.
Bill, I thoroughly enjoyed that,
Oh, did
and that
you?
was very educational and fun.
If I'm going to cut it off.
But don't do that again.
Everyone else just picked one,
I
right?
did.
I will stop you if you do that again. All right.
All right. Okay.
Is it my turn yet?
It is your turn.
All right. So my next one, I picked this one. I know Cameron has things to say about this one, but going back again, as far back as I can go, would have to be Myst.
Yeah, man.
So this was one of the very first
Game
truly
is
puzzle
awesome.
games that I've ever played, and it was hard.
Yes,
it was
it is.
real hard when I was young, but I mean, it holds up. Cameron can
I
attest.
mean, I
think.
couldn't imagine playing that game when I was young. It was
Yeah.
hard enough when I'm 36.
Yeah, and I mean, we didn't figure it all out, but it was just a classic. My
Mhm.
dad brought home a Macintosh computer, and it was the only thing that you could play on there, or it was the only thing that we had, and so this is what we did.
Wow.
And yeah, a classic.
Yep.
One that's up there for
For a
me.
reason. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Nobody is going to know this game.
Really?
This is my only
Okay.
one that I'm
All
bringing
right.
out that no one is going to know. Maybe someone in our audience. If you do, please hit me up on Discord to talk about it. All right. Legend of Dragoon. It was one of those like multi-disc games. It was 4 discs. This game looks like crap for the original PlayStation. I think the graphics were worse than Final Fantasy VII. And that's saying
That's saying
something.
something.
But the story, I felt like the story was really, really good. And unlike most RPGs at the time, again, I was really into RPGs apparently in that age of my life. It had this combo system in the battle. So you would still get into random battles and you'd have boss fights and stuff like that. But instead of it being this boring thing of just like press X a billion times and your guy goes and attacks, it had this combo system where you had a square on the screen and then you had this outer square that went from the outer edges of the television screen that would spiral inward 90
Yeah.
degrees, and you had to time it to where the outer square would line up with the inner square, and if you pressed X at the right time it would make another one trigger,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And these would come in sequences with like a rhythm to it, and you could program which combo setup you were going to use, and you would train them up and it would unlock more, and it was like all the characters had this thing. So you had to memorize this sort of pattern and rhythm for every single battle in the game. And I really, really enjoyed that because I just
That
felt
sounds
like
like
it was
something you would like,
really
yeah.
unique and it required this finesse. And beyond that, it was just a really, I thought, really good story. So yeah, it made a big impact.
Nice. All right. Number 9 for me, this is a little bit of a deep cut, a little bit of a hidden gem. This is a Super Nintendo game called ActRaiser. This was a game that I really enjoyed as a kid, and one of the reasons I really liked it is one of the first examples I can think of a video game as a hybrid game. Think about that a lot now in board games, actually, where they take 2 mechanisms and put them together. We were just talking about Dune Imperium being a mixture of deck building and worker placement. With ActRaiser, it's side-scrolling action platforming, but it's mixed with a civilization building element, kind of like SimCity. So you'll be
Wow.
action platforming, and then you'll go to your city because you're a god. They call you the master.
Oh, wow.
But basically, you're looking down on your people. You start with 2 people,
Mm-hmm.
male and female, and you build your civilization. You build the towns, you build the cities, you get attacked by demons, you have to fight off the attacks, calamities,
Okay.
and then it goes back into the platforming again.
Oh, wow.
And so you go back and forth between this SimCity kind of style into just fun hack and slash action. It's super cool.
That's amazing.
And it's hard. To
Wow.
clear the game, it is difficult, but I really enjoyed it. It's pretty deep cut, but if you ever get a chance to play it, I think it's cool.
What platform?
Super Nintendo.
Okay.
ActRaiser.
Cool. That's a great segue into mine, because mine, this is from the father of video gaming, Sid Meier, Civilization.
Yeah.
Really, I'm going to go with Civilization 2, but same kind of thing. You're building a civilization. Civilization 2 was one of the first ones that kind of had a diplomacy era to it. But one of the things that I found really cool was building the wonder, or coming back to your city and seeing you create something. I really absolutely enjoyed that. So it's still around now. I think 6 is a current one, but the people that I know, they still like 5 better.
These are gaping holes in my video game playing, as I mentioned on here. One day.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yep. All right. Well, my next one is a very not deep cut. But it's one that is foundational in my memory from being a kid. My brother and I used to get excited all week to be able to go to Blockbuster on the weekend and rent the NES system.
Yeah, the whole
Remember
console.
when you could rent the whole console? And it came in like a big padded foam bag.
Right.
And we would rent Super Mario 3.
Oh,
Yeah.
And those are some of my best gaming memories. Like I said, not one that people are unfamiliar with, but definitely a classic and
Oh, yeah.
one of my favorites of all
Super
time.
Mario 3 still holds up. I mean, it wasn't that long ago I played it, and it's still good.
Yep. The
awesome.
warp whistles, man.
That's right.
Also, I just went and saw the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you haven't seen it yet, it's actually pretty good. So,
I'm looking
I've
forward
heard it's
to seeing
good.
it.
Yeah.
All right.
Number 8, Cameron.
All right. My number 8 is Pokemon
Red and blue?
Blue.
Well, okay.
I ended up playing all of them because eventually, I mean, you got to catch them all, right? So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that from ages like 9 to 12, about half of my life in those years was spent playing some version of Pokemon. I knew every one of the original 151. I don't know how many there are now, like 1,000 probably.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I knew all the types and everything. Yeah, played blue. I eventually played, gold and silver. I think the last one I played was crystal. Yeah, Pokemon.
Pokemon.
Yeah.
Dude,
Influential.
Cool.
dude, Pokemon is still hot, man.
It is.
It's crazy that it's still around.
Oh, yeah.
My second son loves it still.
My kids have all the trading cards. And they never play whatever you're supposed to play with the cards. They just trade them back and forth with each other and talk about them. But,
Funny.
That's great. All right, number 8 for me. This is another one's a little bit of a deep cut here. This is a Nintendo game. This game is done very much in the style of the original Zelda. It's not Zelda, but it's like that. It's certainly inspired by it. But in my opinion, this game is a little better than that one for the Nintendo. Okay. And it's a game called Star Tropics.
I've heard of this game.
I
You guys know this one?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never played it.
So this one, you're searching for your uncle. He's lost, and you're going between all these islands, and you're exploring these dungeons, which are full of these really interesting puzzles, these like jumping puzzles, where you're finding switches and locks and keys and all kinds of stuff like that. It had such a great sense of exploration, and it did something that just really blew me away at the time. I'm spoiling a 40-year-old game here, okay? Get ready. There's actually a point in the game where you're interacting with a dolphin, I think, and you need to input some sort of code in a computer, and you actually run the manual underwater at a certain spot on the book, and it reveals a code.
Oh,
What?
that's cool.
And that blew my mind. This
Oh
was
my
Nintendo.
Uh-huh.
You take the Nintendo, there's a letter
Yeah,
that came with it,
yeah.
and you run water under it.
Oh, wow. Physically in the real world.
Physically. Like I put it under the sink in my bathroom,
That's so
and this
great.
code came out, and I was just like, this is the coolest game ever. I probably played through it 4 times. It's so good. So yeah, Star Tropics. Fun game.
Cool.
Cool.
That's pretty awesome, Chris. I don't know if I've had any games that had me put anything underwater, so that's pretty cool.
Tunic actually hints at that.
Oh, does it? Yep.
Does.
There's some
Okay.
similar
Oh,
elements.
that's funny.
I would not be surprised if the designer of Tunic played Star Tropics. We'll just say that.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Mhm.
This is the last of my kind of turn-based sort of board game and video game form, but XCOM. I think you've already talked about XCOM here in the original XCOM. Spent hours playing that. The same kind of thing. You get invested in the soldiers that you're leveling up. I'm trying to remember when this came out. 1994, I guess, is when it came out. The current ones are really super awesome. The Enemy Unknown and XCOM 2, they're really good at making a nod to the original and kind of just putting you back in the universe. But I just love that squad-based, turn-based movement thing. It's very, very cool.
That's awesome. Another one I need to play. Terrible.
All right. My next one,
Number 7.
number 7. So this is maybe a deep track, and probably not a very good one. But I had to stay true to my styling of my list here in games that I played a lot that were influential to me. So this is an NES Nintendo game, Chip and Dale Rescue
Oh
Rangers.
yeah, dude, this game is great.
You played this game?
Yes, I have.
Dude,
Oh,
I
wow.
played the heck out of this game.
Beat
And
Fat Cat.
yeah. And it was probably the first game that I ever played to completion.
Mm.
Like actually played through the entire thing and took my time and really played it through. So the entire game is running around as Chip or Dale throwing wooden boxes
Yep,
at things.
picking up blocks.
Every boss fight is exactly the same. There's a red ball on the ground. You pick up the red ball and you throw it at the boss at like one strategic spot.
Oh
You
man,
hit
you're
it
making me
for-
flashback so hard right now.
You hit it 4 times and you're done. But yeah, it culminates in running through Fat Cat's casino and he's flicking his cigar and like ashes are dropping down on you in the final boss fight.
Oh, that's
But,
great.
Yeah, I played the heck out of this. The Robo Dogs.
Yep.
and, yeah. So
That's a
I'm-
good
I'm-
one, man.
I'm glad you know about that
I
one.
do.
It was a tough decision between that and DuckTales.
Yeah, that's
But,
also a good one.
But yeah. Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers.
Yeah, I got Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers for Christmas one year. I do remember that.
Nice.
All right. So, number 7 for me is Call of Duty 2. Very
yeah.
specifically, Call of Duty 2.
Yeah, man,
cool.
that's a good one.
Mhm.
On the PC, this is the first and only PC shooter that I ever really played. The story mode and online, I think were both amazing. I preferred this one because the machine guns actually sucked in this one.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a heavy machine gun and there's like a Thompson, and both of them are basically spray and pray
Right. Yeah.
type guns. You were really good at this game if you could use the single action rifles or the sniper.
Yeah.
And that made playing online so fun and feels so legit. I've tried to play Halo and some of these other ones, especially any of the Call of Duty games like on console, and people are so good at those, you just
Mhm.
get crushed.
Yeah.
That was my like heyday of playing online shooters.
That's
Call
awesome.
of Duty 2.
There's World War II.
It's
Yes.
World War II
Yeah.
theme.
I
Yeah.
was just getting ready to say the Modern Warfare games are good, but I enjoyed Call of Duty more when it was set in World War II.
And the Battlefield 1942. Same kind of
Yes,
thing. Yeah.
another good one.
Yeah.
All right, number 7 for me. Cameron just mentioned actually. So this game, it's single player campaign, and its graphics are very good on its own right. It's a great game, but the reason why it's on my list is because of the LAN parties, and that's Halo 3.
There you go.
Oh wow.
Unfortunately, Bill, you've never got to be a part of this, but Jason and Cameron, I know you did for sure.
yeah.
Jason, you came over.
I came to one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
I've
know.
done many over my lifetime.
Mhm.
We set TVs up in the living room,
That's awesome.
like at least 6,
Mhm.
around the outer edge of the wall of the living room, put all the chairs and the sofas in the center. We'd start at like 3 in the afternoon on a Saturday and play all freaking night long.
Literally until like the next morning.
Yeah, 8v8, 16 players. We had all these 360s in there locally hooked up, and we just played Halo all day. And it's some of my funnest, best memories of playing video games is playing in those LANs with you guys.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, epic.
That's awesome because I'm now transitioning into my network games, and I have an answer for that later. Not this time, but I have an answer later. But I'm going into the real time strategies. Warcraft 2. It's not like the world of Warcraft. This is the voice actor who did that.
So wait, you're doing 6 because you should be doing 7 right now.
I feel like I've done Empire Deluxe.
How could Bill have gotten
Civilization 2,
confused?
XCOM, and this is the 4th one that I'm doing.
Remember, Rogue was number 10. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't.
Yeah, so I think you guys have just got the numbering wrong. That's fine.
No.
It's 7.
Yeah, we're on 7.
1, 2, 3,
10,
4.
9, 8, 7. You named off 4.
This is my 4th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is 7.
Okay, you're right. 0 base. Sorry, I'm the other way around. I started mine with 1. Anyway, loved Warcraft because that was one of the first real-time strategy. I thought did it really well. And
Warcraft 2 is awesome.
what's that?
Warcraft 2 is awesome.
They're absolutely awesome. But you had peons that were harvesting wood and gold that was a target for your military actions, right? If you could get and attack somebody's peons instead of their military, you're going to win the game, right? I'm going to say these real quick because they're all part of it. But
Okay, Bill.
Command and Conquer, Tiberian Sun, StarCraft, Age of Empires, Empire Dawn, the Modern World, which was really good, holds up well. Total Annihilation, which was great. And then finally, Final Assault. When Chris and I first met, maybe the 3rd time, I brought over my VR headset. And
Oh, yeah.
and showed you Final Assault.
I remember that. Yeah.
VR. But that's that real time strategy,
Mm-hmm.
like a train
You're
set.
picking up the troops and the. stuff and putting them on.
Drop in on the board. To me, that's kind of that family. So anyway, that's how I'm doing my list is families like that. But anyway.
Well played, Bill. You're up to 30 games now on your top 10 list.
Kind of got the general idea.
Well, until you spewed off 15 extra games at the end of your list, my next one was original. But in that vein, one of mine was Command and Conquer. So I actually played Command and Conquer a ton. My brother and I both had computers in our rooms, and we would LAN them together and just play against each other. Even just the original. I think Red Alert gets the most fanfare, and it's a good game, but we played the original a ton, and Tiberian Sun. Really love those games.
Casey got a hold of my list, and she wrote number 0, Command and Conquer Red Alert.
Oh, that's
She was like, I can't believe Command and Conquer Red Alert's not on your top 10 list. I was like, I never really played it.
That's
like,
amazing.
She played it with her brother Christopher.
Oh, cool.
Like a lot when they were young, and so that's
Nuclear missiles.
That's her number 1.
Here's a fun little fact. Command and Conquer is on Noble Night, and they have a video game section, and they have a bunch of older games on it. And on their top ones are like 5 of those games.
The trick is getting it to play on your modern computer.
Right. True.
I'm sure there's a port somewhere.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
All right. So this is another shooter that maybe a lot of people won't know, except for maybe just the name of it. Red Faction.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a lesser known shooter, I guess, on the
Destructible
PS2.
environments, right?
Yes. That was one of the coolest things about this game. The story mode, honestly, was
Yeah.
But man, we had a group of friends that we all owned the game, and we would all get together and play. I mean, hours and hours and hours multiplayer. And because this was basically before your console was connected to the internet. So we would just play 4-player multiplayer just for hours and hours and hours.
Split screen.
That was the other thing about these games. You didn't have all these shields and everything, and the guns, they just did one thing. There was like a semi-automatic rifle that was very unique. It was just a regular pistol. You could also get rocket launchers, and the rocket launchers were amazing because you would shoot a rocket right past somebody, but if you aimed it at their feet, you could blow up the ground around them, and the area effect would kill them. And man, I would play this game right now if I could. So good, Red Faction.
That's a good one.
And then you just respawn and just keep playing, you know? It's great.
That's awesome. All right, number 6 for me. I don't have many multiplayer games on my list. I just mentioned Halo 3, and this would be the other one. And this one squeaks in just in front of it, just because for me, when I think about a multiplayer video game, something that you play with somebody else, this is the game that always comes to my mind, and that's Contra.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
I actually played this in my birthday getaway.
You did.
You beat it several times.
I did. Contra, I've definitely played through Contra more than any other game ever. I just played it so much as a kid. I got so good at it. Actually, my claim to fame, this is not a lie. I am not lying right now. So you know how everybody knows the 30-man code.
Right.
Play Contra. That's for wimps. But if you want to finish the game, you can do that. If you beat Contra, the game will restart slightly harder. Okay? So one night in college, I didn't have anything going on. It was like a Friday night. And I was playing Contra, and I was pretty good at that point. I played through Contra on 3 lives 5 times.
Oh my God.
Before I finally lost out.
That is so crazy.
And by that time, there were so many guys on the screen that it's hard to stay alive. But I was just in the zone, man.
Yeah.
I will just always remember that because I just kept going through it. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going again. Beat it the 3rd time. I'm like, I guess I'm going to keep going, you know?
Yeah.
And got through it 5 times on 3 lives.
That's so
before
crazy.
I finally just couldn't hang anymore. But
wow.
Contra, man, it is a great game.
That was on my list, and I thought it was going to be in yours, but I took it off just thinking it would be. Yeah, there's games that get you in a flow state that are very right, and that's one that can
if you get the spread gun and you're in the zone, you are unstoppable.
Okay, my next one, whatever number it is MechWarrior 2. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but it was.
I played MechWarrior.
Did you?
Yeah.
There's a whole universe and a whole subculture out there that is super, super into it. Battletech's a real-time strategy part of it, but the cool part about that one was it had a great storyline mode. The first one did, MechWarrior 1 did, and the MechWarrior 2 sort of did, but there's a universe where there's princes and different kind of factions that are all fighting for different things, but a lot of them, you're a mercenary who has these giant mechs, which are basically like Transformers that you get inside of and walk around, and you form these teams and you outfit your mechs with different kind of things like lasers and missiles and PCM cannons that all have different effects on different people. MechWarrior 2 to me was one of the best ones because it was good about salvage in that when you fought somebody, you really would aim for the legs or go for a headshot because you would get the salvage of their mech and you could use it to build your own or use their chassis or whatever, which was super, super cool. The ones after that kind of just gave you random salvage. So after you killed them, it didn't really matter, which ended up kind of
a downgrade. Yeah,
it was a horrible downgrade. But the MechWarrior 2, I played that so much. And I had a multiplayer part that was pretty good, but that's kind of, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Circle of Death. You've heard of that, but that's, some games suffer from that especially when you're a machine. But if you're in two mechs and you're trying to kill each other, you would end up in a circle and you both have like a turning radius.
Oh, you're just strafing around each other?
You just end up in a circle trying to get the angle on the next person. And if you're the first one to back out, he gets the first shot on you kind of thing. So anyway, it's very cool.
I messed around with that game a little bit. I don't think I ever got fully into it, but we had it. I messed around with it. All right. I said this was going to be pretty Nintendo heavy. Oh, wait, actually. No, I skipped one. Yeah, no, I went past one because I had to shift into Command and Conquer because Bill spoiled mine.
Sorry.
So one more PC game to mention here. This is another classic, goofy one. Lemmings.
Oh, okay.
Played the heck out of this game also. Was so bad at it. And it's really hard at times. But yeah, love this one. So
that's awesome.
This is where they're trying to run off the cliff and kill themselves or something?
Yeah, so you have this, like some number of lemmings is programmed to come out of a hole in the wall, and they go across this board, and you can assign roles to different lemmings. You can make one a parachute lemming, or you can make one a digger. And so you need to make them dig through things and create tunnels or climb up, like you can make them climb. But you only have a certain number of those roles that you can assign to various lemmings, right? So you're trying to use the lemmings and they're, walking back and forth and running off ledges and stuff. So you're trying to like get as many of them as you can to the goal without killing them all, right? And so you have an acceptable limit of lemmings that you can kill before you start to lose points or whatever. But yeah, many iterations of this game have come and gone, but the original one, played it a lot.
It's a lot of fun. That was hard too.
It is hard.
I did play
yeah,
it was like
it's very hard.
All right. So number 5 for me, you guys are going to appreciate this. The Witness.
Oh, yeah.
This is the best puzzle game I've ever played.
Yeah, that was my number 1. So.
Oh, wow. You're going to go ahead and say?
I will say it. Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
But I will switch up my number 1 because I actually had 11. So I will shift that one and pull a different
11?
one. Yeah.
And all this shade for Bill.
Oh,
seriously.
my.
It's mainly because I miscounted, not because I intended to.
Yeah. The Witness was incredible. You guys, I think, had witnessed to me about it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're like, man, you got to play this game. I think you'll love it. I got it for the iPad. So I think y'all were playing it on your phone. I think it was too.
Played on the Switch.
A little too fiddly for the.
I played it on my phone. I would not recommend it. It made my phone turn into a torch, and it made the battery die in about 5 minutes every time I played it. But
this is one that I think I would really like to play on the PC or the Switch or something like that. But the general idea, it's one of these similar to where you just plop into an environment and you walk around and you're like, what am I supposed to do in this game? And the game doesn't tell you. I love it. I love that type of thing. And it leads you into teaching you a bit of how to solve the puzzles in the game, which are kind of all on these. You end up walking to all these consoles, and it just presents you with a puzzle. And it has something to do with you drawing a line in the right lane, I guess, in the right path. But as the game progresses, the puzzles get more and more complicated.
Yes.
And they start to layer on top of each other.
And then they they get really complicated, we'll say.
Yeah.
I won't give anything away, but that's when it gets awesome.
Or very different.
Yes.
Cool.
There's a turning point that happens in the game where when you discover something, you're like, oh my gosh. And that's all we could say about it, I guess. These guys know what I'm talking about, but you're like, what?
But even before that happens, I mean, I can't count the number of times my mind was blown of like, okay, all these puzzles are like a 5x5 grid where you're drawing a line. And I'm like, surely they can't come up with another way to do this.
Right.
But they're all brilliant.
Yeah.
And super fun and super interesting to figure out.
And it's all the same concept of puzzle, but then they start to iterate on it so much that you will just say you have to start paying very close attention. Because a lot of times you'll walk up to a puzzle and there will be no clues at all.
That is the coolest thing about this game.
And you have to figure out how to draw the line, but you don't know where the source of the truth about the path is going to come from.
Right.
And so you have to just maybe leave it and come back later or
Yep.
something like that.
The way the game teaches you the rules through the puzzles that it
Mhm.
presents you is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Somebody could like do a study on this game of how it trains your brain to
Yeah.
like learn
Yes.
things, because it gives you no rules.
There's
it,
no
it
vocals,
never
there's
explains
no
a single
text.
thing to you about
Yeah.
how to play the game, except through the puzzles that it gives
Yeah.
you, and it slowly unravels how to do it. And it's
You're like
fascinating.
you're like a lab mouse in an increasingly complex maze.
Almost literally.
I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
You're like, is the game playing me right now? What's happening?
Yeah.
Yep.
So The Witness. Now that we've talked about it, I'm almost ashamed that there are 4 other games for me to talk about, but
That's a good one.
I think I'm going to keep it at 5.
Okay. All right. Number 5 for me, going to the PlayStation 2 on this one. This is one of the first series of games that really started to encourage meaningful stealth in an action adventure genre. And I prefer the second one to the first one because the first one has pretty bad graphics, although it's a good game too. But the second one is Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty.
Snake.
Oh, man.
It is
That
a
is
great game.
game.
It
Wow.
took Metal Gear Solid, which was a good game, but had really crap graphics,
Yeah.
to be quite
really
honest,
bad.
and made it look awesome.
Mhm.
And it's just fun. Not to mention, and this is true of all of the games, really fun boss fights. You know?
Crazy boss
like,
fights.
I don't think this one was in Metal Gear Solid 2, but you actually fought a guy who was like a swarm of bees. It's called the Pain. He had like bees swarming around him. He would send them at you.
Was that from 3?
I think that was Snake Eater, yeah. But then you got Fat Man, who's like this guy riding around on rollerblades and all kinds of crazy crap. But man, the game was just
Oh,
fun.
man.
And I played through it several times when I was young just because I really enjoyed
Yeah.
doing the level differently.
Bling.
Because you could. Yeah. And then boing. Yeah, getting spotted. Good stuff. Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty.
Good choice.
Nice.
I played that and loved it as well. I'm transitioning into my LAN party ones now.
All right.
So I used to rent our clubhouse, and you had a group of guys that I think the most we ever had was 20 that would come down and bring a Cisco router and bring our laptops. And I'm going to call out Half-Life in this one. Just because.
I've played this.
Mhm.
Yeah. So
Valve.
Gordon Freeman,
Yep.
Black Mesa kind of thing. I'm going to say some games in here that's going to make you mad. Half-Life was just great as far as a story one, but for our LAN parties, we had Return to Castle Wolfenstein, that had Gasworks and the D-Day Landing and Eagle's Nest. That was just the bomb to play. But anyway, but yes, that's it.
It's a good one.
Cool. All right. Well, now moving into the N64 era. So the Nintendo 64 has to be like the golden era of my video gaming career history. Yeah. I still remember the anticipation of this system coming out and Super Mario 64, which should be on this list, but is not, just because it's one of those ones that everybody would talk about. Actually, all but one of the games that's on here are pretty well-known ones, but they're just ones that fit a particular niche in my video gaming history. The first one has to be GoldenEye.
Yeah.
This is, for me, the multiplayer game. Like, I never really played many multiplayer games growing up, but GoldenEye was the one that I played to death.
Yeah.
My brother and I actually rigged up a tiny little 7-inch color TV that we had lying around the house, and we built a cardboard console that we put in the back of our minivan and wired it up with like one of those power inverters just so we could play GoldenEye against each other on our like 17-hour drives to Florida to see my grandparents.
That's
So,
awesome.
Yeah, just good memories with this game.
Same. It's not on my list. GoldenEye was one of my honorable mentions, actually. And similar to you, great memories. And I remember this one sticking out particularly because my best friend growing up, his family lived in West Palm Beach, Florida. And I would go with him every spring break down there. And I played with his cousins. Again, that's really what makes this list for me, are those moments you remember. And I'll just never forget playing GoldenEye with them, eating Ben & Jerry's peanut butter cup ice cream on the floor in the living room, playing GoldenEye, you know?
Yeah.
Just like a great memory, you know?
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. So this one's already been mentioned. Warcraft 2 is incredibly influential
Oh, wow.
in
There's
my
3 of y'all.
gaming history.
Yeah.
Yeah, the first real-time strategy game that I ever played. I went on to play a bunch more. I mean, StarCraft. Lord of the Rings Battle for Middle Earth
Oh, yeah,
was
I have that.
I think a pretty good iteration of the genre. This one was also my first online gaming experience because they had battle.net. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
You could play against random people, which was insane to me at the time because we were still on dial-up internet, and you could get on there and just pair with somebody and
There you go.
and
On
and-
dial-up.
and- yeah, and play it on dial-up.
So great.
So yeah, the voices that was kind of a unique thing actually for games at the time. There were not a lot of audio recordings, not a lot of times when a game would talk to you because this was back in like the 90s, right? Warcraft 2.
I know that you have some of the orc voices saved up.
Yes, master.
what would they say? If you click, and that was the thing. If you click on the guys a bunch, you would iterate through all of their things.
Right.
And if you click on the ship, he's like, "Stop rocking the boat. You're making me seasick."
It's awesome. Yeah.
We would reference those all the time. I could go on about it, but I won't. Warcraft 2.
That's a good one. All right, I'm starting to get into the ones that everybody knows, but they had to be on my list just because they're special to me. This one, again, is a genre. It's a series of which there are way more than 6. But in my opinion, the first 6 are the best. They're the oldest. They hold up to this day. They're clean and they're hard as nails. And when my kids play them, I love it because they suck at them.
I know what you're going to say.
And that's Mega Man.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And my favorite is Mega Man 2. It is the best. Mega Man 3 is close.
That's
but
my next game.
Okay.
We'll just go ahead and
Let's
get it
go
out
together
there.
then. Mega Man 2 has one of the best soundtracks in video gaming, hands down. We've
Yeah,
talked about
easily.
Big Brigade on here doing the Mega Man
Yeah.
2 run, playing through the whole game on their guitars and drums. But man, the gameplay is just good.
Golly.
It's so tight. It's crazy how, sometimes the old Nintendo games can feel clunky and cheap, right? Mega Man 2 is just precise.
Yep.
If you die, it is your fault.
There are times that you have to move him to where one pixel
Your
of his
toe
of
is
his
on the
toe
block.
is-
Yeah.
But yeah, you can manipulate that. I think Mega Man will just always be up there for me. But Mega Man 2 is my favorite of those.
Awesome.
It's definitely up there for me too.
Wow, I've not played that one.
You never played Mega Man?
I've never played Mega
Oh
Man.
my
Man.
goodness.
Maybe 3 for me a little more so than 2, but
the
they're
moment
both
that
good.
I realized that the key to these games is that you have to do the bosses in a specific order in order to get the power to beat the next one, and that once you actually attack the dude with the thing that he's weak against, it's like a super easy boss fight.
It's probably too easy, but yeah.
But it's one of those things where, like, until it was all like published online, you actually had to sit there and play
Figure
through
it
all
out.
the levels and figure out how to get to the boss, and then die a bunch, and then realize which one you actually had to attack him with.
Yeah, and then when it gave you the password to save your game, it would be like this grid with these little red
I
balls
don't
and
know
all
how
these
many-
different spots. You had to draw the grid and draw the circles.
I don't
and
know how many times I would come back to the Nintendo and be like, no, where is it? Where's my piece of paper? What are you talking about? Why did you leave all your trash in front of the TV?
No, Mom!
Oh, Mom, you threw away my password.
You already vacuumed in front of the screen and killed me, and now you've thrown my sheet away.
Wow. You know how many hours that was, Mom?
You're the worst, Mom.
That's awesome.
All right.
Okay, continuing in my LAN party theme, another one of the games we rotate in was Unreal Tournament 2004.
Oh, man. Okay.
I have to reference one of the maps on there. There's a map called Face that basically has 2 towers on this chunk of land floating in space, and it's the best sniper map ever created because there's like 8 stories to this tower. You can walk around ledges on the outside or different places to hide on the inside and capture the flag. So one group from one part of the tower has to cross this killing field in the middle, hopping along, which I guess was the strategy back then, is everybody bounced everywhere to make it harder to hit.
They still do that.
It's all right.
It's called bunny hopping.
Yeah, bunny hopping. Absolutely bunny hopping all the way across, and just had so much fun playing with the guys. They had a rocket launcher there called the Redeemer that you could actually drive. Kind of things. I don't know if they do that still, but you could rocket hop. So when you
You can
bounce,
do that now. Yeah.
you can shoot your rocket across this huge space and you can jump on top of it, run along the side of it, and you can hop on top of the rocket all the way across, and then jump off.
My kids do that in Fortnite, and they think they're super cool, and I'm like, that's already been done.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not cool.
Right, the original Doom did that. Anyway, my whatever number that was.
4.
All right. This is a super well-known one, but it holds a very special place in my heart. Another N64 game, Ocarina of Time.
Oh, boy.
I have to mention this one.
Wonder when the Zeldas are coming.
Yeah, this is the only one on the list, but this is still holds up. I mean, the graphics are terrible if you go back and look at them now, but I remember when this game was announced, just being so excited, like sitting in class in school and just like daydreaming about the day this game was going to come out and I could go play it, go to the mall, and buy it at Electronics Boutique.
That's awesome.
But
Babbage's.
yeah, this was probably the first, like, I'm not going to call this game an open world game because it's not. I mean, it's
Close.
It makes itself out to be, but it's pretty scripted in terms of you're going to go here and then you're going to go here and then you're going to go here. It's no Breath of the Wild, right? But it was the first game of that type that I had ever played where it's like there's things way off in the distance and like you're going to get there eventually, right? Just holds a very special place to me. I'm a huge Zelda fan in general. I'm debating whether I want to try to play Tears of the Kingdom or not, but we'll see. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Classic.
Nice.
Sweet.
Played that one.
Well, my number 3 is definitely Mega Man 2. I will honorably mention
Nice.
one of the first games that I actually completed all the way to the end was Portal.
Oh,
The game
nice.
Portal.
Yeah.
Yeah, Half-Life Portal.
That's an honorable mention. It's a fun one. Another puzzle
Cake is alive.
type of game. Yeah. That's all I was going to say about it. I was
Got
trying
it.
to be quick.
All right, cool. All right. Following on Jason's heels here, you know the Zeldas are having to come out. This is a series that, in my honest opinion, I feel like has really lost its way over the years. Hot take from me, and I unapologetically say that I think Breath of the Wild is hot garbage. I hate it. I never finished it. I got about halfway through. I got so angry at it because, as James on Dad's on a Map likes to say, the juice was not worth the squeeze in that one. What broke me was I think like my 500th Deku Nut, of which there were like 900 and something.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to get something cool. And I got like an extra item slot. And I was like, that's it. I'm done.
Yeah.
I was like, you do all this work for minimal reward, I feel like, in that game. But getting back to a game that's not that way, that I think is good and is the best Zelda game, is A Link to the Past
Oh, yeah.
on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
The pinnacle of Zelda,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It is the best to me. Difficult puzzles, a bigger world than you expect because you beat it, or you think you do, and then it opens up a whole nother phase,
Oh, wow.
the Dark World, where there's even more. There's like 8 more dungeons after that, which I thought was really cool at the time. And I think I told the story on here before, but really quickly, this is one of the times that my dad has ever got the maddest at me because I ran up a huge Nintendo power bill because of this game. Pre-internet, couldn't look up any help, and I called Nintendo Power so many times. I can't remember how much it was, but it was a lot. My dad was pissed. So I'll always remember that.
You're going to be weeding for days, bud.
But
That's a fantastic game.
Link to the Past, number 3.
Played that one on an emulator. We never had it as Super Nintendo, but we played that one on the Super Nintendo emulators.
I'm guessing this is going to be the only MMORPG out here, but I'm going to say this one just because it has a place in my heart because we had a bunch of guys that were doing it for a while, even though I was horrible at it. But World of Warcraft.
Okay.
You guys played
I never played it.
Nope.
Played for like a little bit in college while it was free.
Yeah. I was a torrent. To me, it's kind of like you with the other one. I have a love-hate relationship with it because it can very easily turn into a second job kind of thing. I chose a magic user Tauren that my other skill was herbology or something. So for me to do my spells and do things, I had to go around and pick plants, right? And I just kind of got bored with that. After a while, it's just like, I could really be doing something more fun than this. But there's some instances there when you're playing with your buddies and you're going after the boss creatures and going through whatever dungeons. They did the pulling aggro kind of thing right.
Cool. All right. What are we on now?
We're on 2,
Number
man.
2.
This is it.
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, my list is not a top 10 of this is my second favorite game of all time, but it is a good one. Last N64 game on the list has to be Banjo-Kazooie.
Oh, wow.
Has anybody played this
I've
game?
not played Banjo.
So I would argue...
I was a Donkey Kong kind of...
Yeah, I would argue of the rare games So Rare Games was a developer. Also did Metroid Prime, some of those other ones before they kind of mysteriously disappeared and lost their relationship with Nintendo. But Banjo-Kazooie was by far my favorite. It was one of their first, might have been the first. And it's in the style of like Super Mario 64, so 3D platformer. I would argue that it's almost better than Super Mario 64. Mario 64 has like the cachet and the name recognition, and it's a great game. And it has the magic associated with all Mario games. But Banjo-Kazooie, from a storyline perspective, music, art direction, all that stuff, and gameplay even, fantastic three-dimensional platformer game through and through. Just really creative, funny, all that stuff. Great game.
I still want to play this one. This is on Switch eShop.
Yeah.
Okay.
I should get it.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
The graphics are pretty dated at this point, as are all N64 games, but it was pretty top-notch at the time. And I remember part of why this stands out to me is I went to some event over the summer in high school, or it might have been middle school, and it was in Harrisburg, where my grandmother lives. So I had to stay with my grandmother for like a week and a half, which, you know, my grandmother's great, but she went to bed super early and I didn't have anything else to do. So I was just like sitting out on her porch. I took the N64 with me. I just played the death out of this thing. It was awesome. So
that's awesome. Good memory.
Yeah.
It's fun. All right. This one's not going to surprise anybody, but my number 2 is Skyrim.
Oh, yeah. I knew this was
I
coming
had
for
several
you.
friends that were like, Cameron, don't play this game. Because you're never going to want to put it down.
Yeah.
And man, I have played the heck out of Skyrim. I've probably restarted the game, I don't know, 5 or 6 times just to start and just try again, because I feel like this game offers nearly endless possibilities.
Yeah.
For how to shape your experience in the game, right? Because it is this sandbox thing. You can go anywhere. You can emphasize a different skill this time.
Yeah.
You know, if you
want
start
to wield 2
over.
weapons, weapon and a sword,
Right,
weapon and
you can go
magic,
all
all
bow,
magic.
like
Yeah.
all magic, whatever. You can do your alchemy, like where you are picking plants, and it actually is kind of fun.
Yeah.
I mean,
You can get your one-handed up to 100 and one hit everybody.
right? and beyond that, there's so much stuff to do, right?
Yeah.
You can buy a house. Like, and then
Get
beyond that,
married.
you could get married. The scenery, honestly,
Yeah.
is what blew me away about that game. I've played it on the PS3, the Xbox, and the PS4.
Do you know there's a
it's such a good game.
It is.
there's a hack for it to do it in VR. I have it in VR and played
Oh
it
my
on
goodness,
VR for
that
a
would be
while.
fun.
It looks good.
Yeah, but yeah, like when you climb to the top of a mountain and it's dawn, and you look out over the mountains and there's dragon flying through the sky, and there's and the
it's so
music
good.
is incredible. Oh my goodness, I don't know how many hours I've sat writing code listening to the Skyrim soundtrack.
Yeah,
wow.
dude, I hear you.
It's so good. I could go on, but I won't. I love Skyrim.
I was always bad about carrying too much stuff, because if you go overweight, you go really slow.
Oh yeah.
And then I discovered that if you got married, your wife would carry stuff for you.
Oh.
And so I used her
no.
as like a mobile treasure chest. So I carried like twice the stuff, but
Yeah.
then Bryce played my game and got my wife killed. And so I lost all my stuff.
Oh my god.
I was like, Bryce, I didn't care that she was dead. I was like, but my stuff. All my stuff was in her. She had all my stuff.
Wow. Oh,
You're a
god.
terrible human being.
Oh, that's really funny.
Oh man, good times. All right, number 2. This one for me, well, with the exception maybe of my number 1, obviously, but maybe this one does a better job of this. Memorable games for me are games that make you feel completely immersed in the world and you almost get lost in it. And that's a combination of amazing graphics and amazing soundtrack, of which this one has both. When I think about this game, I don't think as much about the gameplay, although it's excellent, but I just think about how it made me feel when I was playing it, and that's Hollow Knight.
Oh man,
Oh,
yeah.
Hollow Knight is so good. The gameplay is great. The fighting, the bosses are all great. It's great. It's an awesome Metroidvania, but the aesthetic of Hollow Knight is just top tier.
Yeah.
Honestly. That's why I think about it, is because it was a world I was in, you know?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed. So
The-
number 2 for me.
The developers have finally come back online and started reporting information, because Silksong is the follow-up to Hollow
Yeah.
Knight, and it was announced a long, long time ago, like pre-pandemic, I think. And then the developers just fell off the map, and nobody knew what happened.
Mhm.
There's finally word has started coming back out. They've said it's not going to release in 2023,
Ugh.
but it's scheduled to come out pretty soon, and they're still working on it. So
Wow.
good news for Hollow Knight fans out there.
Great game.
This is a top tier game for me too.
Not on either of y'all's. I'm surprised.
Should have been on my list. It was on my honorable mentions mainly because, again, I pushed some of these ones off that I knew other people were going to mention.
Yeah.
That I wanted to make room for other stuff. So
it's my number one game.
Okay.
I'm just going to say it now since we're already talking about it.
Yeah.
It's my number one game.
Okay.
My experience with this game was I was recovering from a surgery, so I had plenty of time to devote to it. And man,
yeah, dude,
it's
magical.
I've never played a game like it.
Mm-hmm.
And people may not know Metroidvania, but like I had never played one before. So this whole thing of like, well, maybe you don't have whatever you need in order to pass through that area yet. Either you're getting killed or you literally physically can't get your dude to move past the thing. Just turn around and go back and mark the map.
Yep.
Right. That whole thing. Just incredible. I don't think I 100%ed the happy path, ending of the game. I got the sad ending of the game.
Yeah.
The happy path ending of the game is really hard.
And it's awesome and it's worth it, but it is hard. You fight the Radiant and it's no joke.
Right.
Let me tell you.
So, and like combat in that game is incredible. It's one of those other ones. Like it's very finely tuned.
It is. It's
like,
tight.
Yeah. It's definitely not sloppy. If you get hit, it's because you were in the way.
Yeah.
Right.
And you and I talk about Christopher Larkin's soundtrack all the time.
That's another one I've listened to so many times just to enjoy the soundtrack. It's so good.
Wouldn't you agree, Bill? It's great.
I haven't. I've played it. That's one of the ones you have to remember the map or something. And I was like, I can't get through this.
I think that's one of the biggest complaints with Hollow Knight, honestly, is that it doesn't hint you very well in the early game as to where the heck you're supposed to go. But I love that. I love that about games.
Yeah. I played Tomb Raider where they did that too, and I was like, I've spent so much time lost in Tomb Raider. It was killing me. All right. My next one is Lone Echo.
Never heard of this.
Yeah, it's a VR.
Is that the dolphin game? Where you swim around as a dolphin on Sega?
Echo the Dolphin?
No, not a dolphin game. But you're on a spaceship and you are a maintenance robot with the captain. And there's something that's gone on with the ship set in the far future, sci-fi, and the graphics on it are just phenomenal. And I was super concerned that I would get nauseated in this one. This one, I don't know what they do, but it is absolutely amazing about moving around. You've got thrusters on your hands that you can engage on either hand to move around, and you can grab things as you move through the ship and pull yourself through, but you're in 0G. And just different things happen on the ship that need to get fixed, and there's some growing mystery that the captain's panicking about, and she's trying to engage you to help get things fixed, and you're going into these dangerous areas that they can't go in because they're a human and you're like a robot. And
that's
just
cool.
The drama in it is really cool. And then like when you're doing spacewalks that are outside and you're seeing a planet outside, and just like some of these other spatial phenomena that's happening as you're looking around. When you're in VR, you're just viscerally there.
Wow, that's cool.
It is a super cool.
I heard someone commenting that he believes that we're on the very, very early stages of VR becoming like the best video game experience ever.
Yeah. It would be fun to have you guys just play some opening sequences on this, or take it for the night or something, because it is absolutely cool.
Lost Echo. Cool.
Lone
Echo.
All right. Well, my number one, as we talked about already, was The Witness.
Oh, right.
And that is pretty high up there on my actual top 10 lists, I would have to say. But because I accidentally put 11 games on my list, I will mention another one. This is another one, Chris, that you need to play at some point. That's Hades.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this has been on my hit list for a while.
This is a roguelike. It's like all the Greek gods, right? So you are the son of Hades. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a little while since I played it, and it's been even longer since I've talked about Greek mythology. But you're basically trying to escape the underworld and get out from underneath your dad's rule. But just a phenomenally well put together roguelike, and has some cool like surprise moments. And then the dialogue in this game, it's like the story just keeps going and going and going. You're like, surely the story has ended now. I can't talk to this person again and get new information, but it just keeps going and going and going. So many different characters and different paths and power-ups and things that you can get. It's very cool.
That is cool.
This is the first real roguelike that I'd ever played, and so really enjoyed this one.
Awesome.
Definitely not my number one game of all time, but it's up there. And so
I gotta get this played.
Mention my honorable mention.
Cool. Yeah. Hollow Knight.
Yep.
I was trying to think of another honorable mention, but I'm just going to go with Hollow Knight.
Okay.
I'm going to take Cameron's.
You're going to take the Cameron's? All right. Okay, before my number one, quick honorable mentions. GoldenEye we already mentioned. Elden Ring just missed the list. Great game, but not quite there. The Resident Evil series, I really enjoy, particularly Resident Evil 4 is very good. That's actually my number 11.
Okay.
Just off the list. Great game. Kingdom Hearts 1. The rest of the Kingdom Hearts games are bad, but the first one is pretty good. Final Fantasy Tactics. Final Fantasy 9. Underrated.
Final Fantasy 9 is incredibly underrated. Yeah.
Super underrated. One of the best characters in Final Fantasy ever, the Black Mage Vivi.
Yes.
Awesome. And it kind of got back to its roots of like castles and knights and got away from kind of the cyberpunky machine stuff. But I don't hate that. Because my number 1
There you go.
is Final Fantasy 7.
Okay. The original, I'm assuming.
This is a lot of people's number 1. I know that. But yeah, and I would include the remake in this.
Okay. Okay.
Because I think the remake is really well done,
I
honestly.
sure the gameplay's a lot different.
Yeah. I mean, it's not turn-based. It's real-time.
Right.
But when you cast a spell, time slows down and you go into menus.
Okay.
So it is very reminiscent. And it has a materia system, a lot like 7 did it.
Okay.
So it's similar.
Cool.
But yeah, Final Fantasy 7, it just hit me at the perfect time.
Right.
It was like 1996, 97. It's like a young teen. Got this kind of awkward dude who's in this love triangle with these 2 really hot girls. And I'm like, dude, just pick one. You know, they're like both awesome. And he's bumbling around like an idiot. But yet, it's still fun playing through his story because it's really story. And I mean, Final Fantasy has one of the best villains of all time, Sephiroth. People don't even know what Final Fantasy is. When they hear One Winged Angel, know that that's Sephiroth.
Right.
He's just identifiable, iconic, really, as a villain. Just so many cool things about the game. The story just sucked me in. I think one of the reasons why it was so successful is I think it was Westerners' first like real exposure to the RPG genre. Like we had Dragon Warrior, which is Dragon Quest, and there was Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 3 on Super Nintendo, but I feel like Final Fantasy 7 is really where RPGs kind of like video game RPGs took hold in the mainstream consciousness of Americans. And I was one of them. And just got me, man. Final Fantasy 7 probably will be my forever number 1.
I played until the beginning of disc 3. And my dad made me turn it off, so I never got to finish it.
Oh, really?
Literally.
Why?
Because it was scary and weird.
Wicked monsters and love triangles.
I need to give this one another shot.
I'm Team Tifa, by the way.
Okay.
I need to give it another shot. I downloaded the original on the Switch with the original graphics and all that stuff and had a hard time getting into it just because the graphics are so terrible.
They're so bad. Yeah. Cutscenes are good.
I would love to try the updated version on.
It's good.
If I ever get a PS5.
It only goes through, it's weird, literally like a third of the game. It barely even gets through disc 1.
Oh, right.
So I don't know where they're going to go from here because there's a lot left.
Right.
But it's worth playing.
That's cool.
Cool.
Yep. Bring us home, Bill.
All right. Quick honorable mentions. Did any of you guys ever play tower defense games?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it was kind of funny. I thought that might be in
computer
this
games.
That would be my honorable mention.
Tower defense. Yeah, Defense Grid Awakening is a really good one. Really good graphics and stuff like that. Anybody play Army Men?
No.
Little Green Army Men?
Yes. This was a console game.
Yeah, it was console. PC game too. First problem. That was very fun. Faster Than Light, FTL.
Is this where Bill just gets to list off 30 more games?
No.
Because
let me see that paper, Bill.
He did 4 games. Yeah, well, I will only ask this on the last.
Mine was Kingdom Rush. That was the tower defense.
Well, the other one I was kind of surprising. It was like fighting games. Did you guys play like Virtua Fighter or like
Street Fighter? Mortal Kombat too.
Mortal Kombat. Because Virtua Fighter was like the first one that I saw that I really was amazed with what computer graphics could do. Yeah. The whole floating camera around in the center ring.
I remember Virtua Fighter. Yeah,
it was absolutely amazing. All right, my number 1 game is the VR game Alex, which is in the Half-Life universe. So Alex is a relative of Gordon Freeman. Gordon Freeman has disappeared. You're in a city that's right outside the Black Mesa. And in the opening scene, you're going through this dystopian universe where there's soldiers that are going around. And the first apartment that you go into, the glass is all broken. Everything looks horrible. You look out the window and you see the War of the Worlds kind of 3 tripod things going around, stringing power cables around.
Yeah.
And it gives you just this awesome, ominous feeling
Yeah.
that you have no idea what's going on, but it's something big. And
The world's ending.
The world's kind of ending, and you've got this holy crap moment that you know that you're going to have to cross this city for some reason that's coming later and go through all this stuff. And the aliens are out there, and they're the face huggers and stuff like that. But they do a great job of mixing humor and sci-fi stress sort of thing. Because you have a guy that you're talking to back at your home base in your ear all the way through, and he kind of talks you through things, which is super nice sometimes because it makes you feel more comfortable going into really scary places. And it really makes a huge difference when all of a sudden he disappears and you're in a really scary place. And when you're in VR and it's all the way around you, I mean, it's
cool.
impactful.
Wow.
So anyway, Alex is...
Are you saying Alex or Hallex?
Alyx. It's
Oh,
how
Alex.
Alex.
Okay.
So anyway, but it's kind of the quest to find Gordon Freeman.
All right.
Well, now that we've done an entire episode worth of video game talk,
We're making it up to you
Your-
all,
Your
right?
your first
It's a double feature. This is like Secret Cabal gaming podcast length,
first
dude.
top 10 list from the Hidden Gems guys, which includes 700 games.
Right. Not board games.
Oh, awesome. Well,
now what?
we better get going.
So do you guys want to get into the board games that you guys picked?
Let's do it. Let's get into the games.
I did great.
You are right, my son, both in your thought and your action. You understand the nature of people who have chosen you to govern and the grandeur of the office you have received from them. This was the way in which we and our forefathers made Rome great, by putting the honor and the service of our country before those of our own parents and children. Fabius Maximus.
Return to Rome in all its glory. Walk in the footsteps of Rome's elite. In Quo Vadis, you play one of Rome's mighty patrician families in a power struggle that will decide the destiny of Rome, and ultimately the world. To win, your candidate must navigate the treacherous political waters of the empire and master the Senate.
Do you understand the meaning of Quo Vadis, Maximus?
Father to a murdered wife.
Husband to a murdered wife.
Yeah, not father to a
Father
murdered
to a
wife.
murdered son.
What's going on here? Awesome. Quo Vadis.
You guys know what Quo Vadis means?
Please elaborate.
I looked it up in Latin. It means whither goest thou?
Or will you go?
Or like, where are you going,
Yes.
my lord?
What is
Depending
your
on the-
intention?
Yeah, depending on the translation.
Yes. Quo Vadis. Published in 1992. Did y'all know that?
No.
Oh, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, 1992.
The artwork suddenly makes so much more
Yeah.
sense.
By Mayfair, Hansem Gluck, and Amigo. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 2,611. Designer of Quo Vadis is the great Rainer Knizia. This game was recommended by Ultima Ratio, Jay Wowser, and Torrey Larson on our guild, and also received 24 thumbs on the Geek List, which is
Wow.
why we are reviewing it, which I think was the most. And I should also mention really quickly, if people are keeping track, there was one game we're not reviewing today that actually had the most thumbs. That's Fresh Fish by Freedom and Freese. I could not easily acquire that game, unfortunately. So we'll get to it once I acquire it, but that's why we're not doing
So
that one.
send your copy
Yeah.
to Chris.
Yeah, exactly. Hard to find. All right. Brief rule summary for Quo Vadis. Quo Vadis is a game of cunning and negotiation, where players are trying to get their player pieces, also known as their senators, to advance from one committee room to the next in order to gain points and to hopefully have at least one of their senators present in the inner sanctum before the game ends. The game board is made up of a series of connected rooms or committees, which are made up of 1, 3, or 5 spaces. First, it's important to understand that the game board has a directionality to it. So let me explain. So as I mentioned, the game board is made up by all these rooms that are connected by paths, but the bottom of the board is where your player pieces or your senators enter the board.
Begin their political
Yeah,
career.
when they're peons, right? So they start in the low committees, and then through cunning and negotiation, they're trying to work their way up the board into these higher committees, ultimately to end up in the inner sanctum, which is a 5 committee member room where pretty much all paths ultimately lead. Okay? On top of the paths connecting the committee rooms are randomly assigned laurel wreath victory point tokens, which range in value from 2 points up to 5 points. If you are able to get one of your senators to advance up a path to the next higher committee room, you pick up that victory point token and add it to your points pile. That token is then replaced by a new randomly chosen victory point token. Randomly chosen. All right, you can do one of 3 things on your turn. First, you can bring one of your unused senators into play by placing them on any unoccupied space within one of the 4 committee rooms present at the bottom of the board. So remember, those are the places where your senators enter the board. So they can go into one of those empty rooms if there's a space available. Another action available to you is to advance one of your senators from a committee room to a higher connected committee room if you have the majority support of the committee. So I need to explain this. So in a committee room of size 1, if you are in that room, you're the only pawn there, you have the majority, you can advance at your leisure, right? Now let's consider a committee room of size 3. So if you're the only pawn in that room, you might think you have the majority because you're the only one in there, but you don't, because in a size 3 room, there have to be at least 2 voting people in the room. So if you have 2 of your people in the room, you have the majority. But what happens if you have a pawn, and let's say Cameron has a pawn in that room? Well, nobody has the majority. However, you can negotiate with each other to give somebody a vote. So if I make a deal with Cameron somewhere else on the board or for points, for example, and be like, hey, I'll give you this or that if you'll vote for me to have the majority here so I can advance, you would then have the majority. And it gets even more interesting if it's me, Cameron, and Jason in the room. I would still only need one person's support, but now Jason and Cameron are vying against each other to negotiate with me, maybe, right? Depending on the board state. That should give you an idea of what the negotiation looks like. Finally, players also have the option of moving the Caesar token onto any connected path of their choosing. The Caesar token serves 2 purposes. First, it covers the victory point laurel token present on that path. Any senator that travels along that path can still do so, but will not collect the victory point token. Second, the Caesar token allows a player to advance to a higher committee room in the absence of a majority. So you could be in a room of 5 people and have the only pawn in there and everybody else has more than you. But if the Caesar token is on a path leading out of that committee, you can advance despite having any sort of majority support. The game ends once all 5 spaces of the inner sanctum are filled by senator pawns. Importantly, if you do not manage to get at least one of your senators into the inner sanctum by the end of the game, you cannot win. All players with at least one senator present in the inner sanctum then add up their laurel points, and the player with the most points wins the game. That's generally how you play Quo Vadis.
All right.
Good job.
So before we get going, I want to mention we had put out a form for folks to submit your review, and we got a handful of responses, but not actually one for this game. So in the subsequent reviews, you can expect to hear those comments if you were out there in the audience and you remember submitting a review to form. We didn't have any about Quo Vadis, so I guess no one had played this one maybe.
Yep. So we got to do it the old-fashioned way.
That's right.
We got to come up with a question here.
That's right.
All right. So I think there are a lot of interesting things to talk about here, obviously. The game is a negotiation game, and obviously we're going to talk about that. But I think where I want to start is one of the things that makes this game a little bit interesting and unique, and it's the in-game trigger. Reiner Knizia occasionally likes to throw these interesting things in his games. High Society comes to mind, actually, where you can just lose if you don't do something. So, for example, in High Society, if you spend the most money in High Society, you just can't win. In Quo Vadis, also designed by Reiner Knizia, if you don't get a pawn into the inner sanctum, regardless of how well you did and how many points you scored, you cannot win. That is also the in-game trigger. So once that topmost room fills with 5 people, the game is just over. It stops. So that's something you have to consider here as you're playing and making your negotiations, of that timing aspect and trying to make sure you're there, right? So how did you guys feel about this in-game trigger and how that played out?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting wrinkle to the game in that it definitely affects how you play. Like, I think in the first game that we played of this, Chris, you were just dominating all the spaces at the bottom of the pyramid, right? so that nobody else could get in there and you had the majority in all those rooms. But we were still kind of like negotiating with each other to move beyond that, to like get out of your way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like you were feeling some serious pressure towards the end of that round to like even get into the end.
Yep.
And so it's an interesting balance of like how much do you try to hold on, and we'll talk about this more, I'm sure, but hold on to like strength in a particular room so that other people are reliant on your help to move forward, versus how much do you push forward to ensure that you like have that spot at the end. Because it's not like you don't get anything more for having more than one person in the end room, right? Like you don't get points for getting there.
Nope.
It's just you have to have at least one person there.
Right.
But that's the peril of the game too, because my inclination the first time I played it was, well, I gotta get in there, right? Or I'm gonna lose. So I gotta make sure that happens. But the problem with it, I'll say the balance that it forces you to strike is if you get your dude in there, you've advanced the game toward its end.
Right.
Right. So there is this timing thing of like, I need to collect as many points as I can, not just figure out what is the absolute most efficient path to get my guy in there. Because you might be able to do that without scoring basically any points. And if you get in there, great. You didn't lose the game, but you might not win.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So the games that I played, I was always keeping one eye towards trying to like lock somebody out, because the other part of that strategy is not only getting your stuff person in, but getting more people in there so that get 2 or 3 people in there so somebody else can't. And I almost wonder, it's sort of a, I won't call it a red herring, but it's super difficult for an individual person to get like 3 in a 4-player game, right? Because there's 5 seats in there. You can maybe get 2.
And you're usually dependent on everybody else.
You're dependent on somebody else. So you almost have to be in negotiation with somebody else to say, okay, let's both of us get in 2 without really saying that across the table, because then they're not going to help both of you do that kind of thing. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic there. Yes, you got to get something in there, but as a strategy to knock somebody out of the game, I don't know. I still wonder about it.
At 5 players, I think it's a real threat for sure. And I've played at that player count as well. And I think it's best at 5. And BGG says it's best at 5. I think for that reason, because that threat of getting just knocked out is really real at that player count. But I will say, going back to what Jason said, it is such an interesting choice in this game to try to jump on those inner rooms. I remember, Cameron, you were kind of griping about this one game because you were to the left of me, and I kept jumping in before you because I was like, oh, well, shoot, I should probably move forward, but if I enter into this committee, if that spot's open, now I'll have the majority in there. And then somebody else would move up. I'm like, oh, shoot, if I jump in here, now I'll have the majority. I don't have to negotiate with anybody. I can just advance. But if you keep putting your guys in at the bottom and you're not advancing, the game can just end on you and you haven't really scored any points. I remember that particular game I'm thinking of, Jason, I think, only got 4 people into play, and I had like 8, and he won because he was just advancing and scoring, and I was getting all these majorities, but by the time I could capitalize on majorities, the game was over.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to like balance that timing aspect.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because we played again and because you were kind of doing the same thing again, because we're like kids in an elementary school class. Like, we literally come into the Chris's game room. We all sit down at the exact same seat. That's like our seat.
Right.
But it's funny because in a game like this, that actually affects the game because it means that you're always playing in the same turn order, roughly or exactly. And because we had that history, and this is in a completely separate game. You weren't even playing that strategy this time. I actually used that as a negotiating tactic. I basically said, look, all right, it's my turn. Like, if you have the chance to place a dude on your turn, the agreement here is that you're not going to place a guy there. You're going to let me have it. And you actually had to, because and I don't know if you mentioned this in the rule, but agreements are binding for one round.
Yeah.
So in that case, you were actually like, oh, I actually can't place a guy there, even though it's what I want to do. So I have to choose something.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how the negotiations are sort of this open sandbox of make up whatever you want. And I had a thought that, like, I think we maybe didn't fully tap into the potential of that. Like, the whole 1 round limitation is pretty powerful, but we were finding that a lot of the agreements that we were coming up with would take longer than 1 round, right? It'd be like, oh, I'll let you go here and then you let me go the next time or whatever. We never did things like requiring collateral for things that were going to take longer term. So you give me like a 2 or 3 point coin or something like that.
Oh, we did that.
We did.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, Bill and I did that a few times.
And saying like, and I'll give it back when you make good on it.
Oh,
No.
we didn't use it like that.
Well, that's
It
what
was
I
just
was
a
thinking. It
fun.
was like you could
Yeah.
require like a lot more points to be like, you're gonna do this, right? Okay, fine, then
Oh,
prove
I
it.
see
I'll
what you're
give it back
saying.
to you when you make good on it, right?
Right.
We could have been doing
We
stuff
get
like
into all
that.
kinds of debates on how long is that binding.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's like, well, it's binding as long as you fulfill your side of the thing. I'm promising to
Yeah.
give you your collateral back. But like we could have, it's a whole like other depth of negotiation strategy that we could have gotten into.
Yeah.
Makes me kind of curious to try.
Yeah.
it out.
And I want to talk more about negotiation, but I realized I forgot one more quick rules thing, and then I'll let you go, Bill, just to add it so people aren't like, he didn't mention this. So you can negotiate anything, points that you're holding. I'll do this if you'll do this for me. Pretty much anything goes. But there is one additional thing I forgot to mention is that if you do work out a deal with somebody, there are these 1 point tokens next to the board.
Yep.
And for every vote that you give somebody in support, you get one of those 1 point tokens. So let's say we're in a 5-person room and it's me and Jason has 2 pawns. He can advance me if he gives me 2 votes. We could make some sort of deal, but for those 2 pawns, he'll also get 2 1 point tokens,
Right.
which also incentivizes deal making as well.
Right.
Forgot to mention that. Sorry.
Yeah.
That might go along with what you were going to say, but go ahead.
I was going to call that out because I was in explaining Chris's strategy of just piling on the beginning. You might be wondering why he would try to do that. And it's because the more deals you're involved in, the more points you're gaining potentially. I'm not sure it outweighs the points you're getting from advancing, but it is an interesting side pot, right, to try to go for.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting strategy. Well, I was going to ask Chris, when doing that strategy, the Caesar ended up playing a big part of the how that strategy was going to play out. And I was going to ask you what you thought about that.
Yeah, we should talk about this because this actually kind of wrecked me in that game. So I was getting a lot of majorities low in the board, and I think I actually had one that had a 5 point token on. I was like, sweet, I can move forward. Nobody can stop me. I'm going to get 5 points. Sweet. And then somebody dropped Caesar on top of it, and I was like, Bill, yeah, it was you, wasn't it? Now I don't get my 5 points, but even I think more interestingly than that, I don't want to advance because I know I have the majority. I want the points under that. But then everybody in the room with me started advancing and filling up the room in front of me
Right.
Right.
to where I can't advance because it's full now, right? And so the Caesar token can be really vicious in that way, and that it can hurt somebody from scoring, but it can also help people move forward and gum up things downstream, basically, if that makes sense. So I think Caesar is an interesting play. But I will say, too, I don't feel like it was being used a lot. Maybe that's just our inexperience, because it did seem like spending your whole turn just to move Caesar felt like a big sacrifice. I don't know.
It's also really risky, right? Because you can spend your entire turn to move Caesar, and if you're
Somebody can just
moving
move
it to
Yeah.
something that advantages you in a good way, which usually you are, or disadvantages someone else, they can just spend their turn and move it right back. I mean, you've wasted an entire turn.
Yep.
Like, yeah, sure, maybe you forced one other person at the table to waste their turn
The other two
to
have just
undo what you
benefited,
just
yeah.
did. But like, how many times do you want to go back and forth on this? I'm going to move it there. You're going to move it back. I'm going
Right.
to move it there. You're going to move it back.
Right.
It feels very risky to try to do that.
Although the 2 point tokens
Yes.
have the Caesar movement on it, so you can negotiate to say, "Hey,
That's-
let
that's
me
a good
go on
point.
this 2." You still get points, and then you put it in a place, and you're right. Then you cost somebody.
I think that's actually a pretty strong move
Mhm.
that we were undervaluing and learning more about. I actually started in later games trying to set up myself to be able to move forward on those 2 point tokens / when you get the token, you can also move Caesar for that reason. Because I didn't want to spend my whole turn to move Caesar, but it's nice to be able to move Caesar.
right.
So if I can get 2 and still move him, that's still pretty good, right? I thought that was a good addition to the game.
Yeah.
It is, and it's huge, especially when you're like wanting to get that last step into the Senate chamber, and you don't have the majority.
Yeah.
and it's moving it there. I mean, you're forcing somebody else's hand to.
You could
Yeah,
end the
move it.
game that way.
Right. At both my games, I was trying to do that, and it didn't really work out because it needed to be a 5-player game, or I
Mhm.
needed to have somebody else that was thinking along the same lines. But
Yeah. Yeah, but that threat's definitely there. I mean, you could have 4 out of 5 sanctum spaces filled with no majorities going into the sanctum. But if somebody dropped a Caesar token on one of those paths, it could end, right? Which is a threat.
In the game that Jason won, I was like so poised to win that because I was staring at a 4 and a 5 and whatever, and I just delayed. But as soon as it passed my turn, everybody else at the table decided we can't let Bill do this, and basically ended the game by the time it got around to me. And it was like, holy cow, how the heck did that happen?
Yeah.
But you're right. If you drop the Caesar at the entrance to the Senate chamber, truly it could fill in 3 people that very next turn, and you can end a game just like that.
Just like that.
I think you raise a good point with like the hidden information aspect of this game, right? Because nobody knows how many points they can see your chip stack.
Right.
They don't know how many points you have, and so everybody was targeting Bill because he had a massive chip stack.
Right.
But he had been getting a lot of chips, like little 1-point chips, from like helping other people out in deals. And
Bill
so
loves to be involved in those deals.
I
man.
benefited from that in that everybody thought Bill was the point leader, and I was like, "Hey, Bill's the point leader.
Let's just end the game.
If you guys vote me into the Senate, we'll end the game." And they voted me in, and I won because I had more higher point value tokens. And I mean, to be fair, I didn't know I was going to win that game for sure. But yeah, I like the hidden point mechanism.
Although, I mean, it's kind of funny. You can watch the points go in, and you could do the math in your head if you wanted to. And I mean, that wouldn't be fun to me necessarily.
Yeah, good luck with that. You can do that. You're smarter than I am.
It's all perfect information.
So we've talked about some good things about the game.
Mhm.
Like, what are some things that you didn't enjoy about this game, if any?
Cameron, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my kind of issue was with feeling like I could get screwed when some players, Chris, just keep taking the only available spots. I think in that game, I think I managed to get like before, say, the second half of the game, literally 2 guys out there.
Yeah, I was filling in those lower
And
rooms
the problem,
aggressively.
the problem with that is if you can't get your guys out there, it's not even so much that you're not like advancing and getting all the points. You can't be part of deals, right? And you need to be part of deals.
Right.
In order to get the bonus points, in order to get people to negotiate with you and give you their tokens. So it's almost like if you can't get in the game, then you certainly can't win the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's tough. And I think I think we kind of came around on that because you were realizing, well, what I was doing is not the
I didn't
best
win.
strategy in general. And then I was coming around on like, well, maybe I can negotiate my way into board position. So
it's funny. I remember you saying that, and I was kind of being empathetic with you because you can kind of like really feel bad, right? I mean, at least to me, there were some times when I was playing this game, an instance very similar to you. All the initial places were full, and I had basically 2 places I could move, and people were saying, "No, I'm not going to take that deal, Bill." You can move Caesar.
Yeah,
right.
you have to move Caesar.
I was going to sit in my spot forever. I'd still be sitting in this spot until somebody came up and gave me a deal because it was like Caesar wasn't going to do me any good.
Thematically, I mean, this game, and I know we're supposed to be on maybe cons, but I mean, thematically, it's pretty tight because this whole sort of like political negotiation, manipulation thing is supposed to be kind of brutal, right?
Yeah.
And in that sense, in terms of the theme, like my dude was getting edged out by the guy who had more influence or whatever.
Yeah.
You were getting literally edged out personally by us because we thought that you had an edge that we didn't have. And so we were punishing you, right? Socially and politically.
Yeah.
So, I mean, thematically, it's pretty strong.
Yeah. Yeah, cons for me, I had a hard time coming up with a lot of cons for this game. I have a couple that I'm not going to mention because I think they're a little nitpicky, but I guess I did experience a couple times, especially the last time we played it. Based on how the pawns come out, you can experience maybe a little bit of partnering in this game that can maybe feel not fun for the other players who aren't involved in the partnership. And I guess what I mean by that is if 2 players find themselves in a situation where they're in the same rooms together a lot, they can be like, okay, look, if you let me advance here, I'll give you a token. And let's say there's a 3-point token on the track. You're going to score 2. I'm going to score 2. I'm not getting ahead of you necessarily, but we're getting ahead of these other 3 guys. So let's do that. And you can kind of just keep doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 people can
You
kind
and
of
Bill,
just...
is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. We just kept dealing with each other,
Yeah.
right? And we weren't really dealing with you all. And because it was just working out that way, I was going to say I felt bad about it. I didn't really feel bad about it. I could see how maybe that wouldn't be fun if you were on the other end of that, where 2 people were just kind of like...
I mean, I was kind of feeling bad about it as we were doing it because I knew you were ahead of me. And I was like...
Did you?
Yeah, I knew you were because I was
Well, you shouldn't have been doing it then.
Well...
I thought you thought we were close. I thought we were close. I was happy to just be going ahead of them.
I kind of was too because I thought Jason was going to do that with me, or I was going to get something else that was going to be a similar kind of deal. And like Jason's like, no, I'm not doing that with you. And it's like, what up, dude? And it's like, you don't see this
I would
out?
never say that.
Do you not see how this works?
Exactly. So it's like, okay,
Just do what me and Chris were doing, and then you do it.
exactly.
Yeah, I definitely see that. Being on the outside on that was challenging at times. But yeah, I had a hard time coming up with cons for this game as well. If I had to say anything, it would be that There are certain paths in the game where they're like solo paths.
Yeah.
Basically, like it's a one space, one person room. So if you go into this room, you can move yourself out of it whenever you want. And I think I wanted those paths to feel more viable than they actually did.
Yeah.
Like, because it's a free movement. You're like, well, I don't need anybody else's help. I can go up this path. And if I go up this path, this is like an alternative to having to negotiate.
It's a scare quotes free
you,
movement.
You get no points.
Yeah,
Right.
but most of those paths have no point tokens.
All of
in
them.
between them. All of them.
Yeah.
And there's usually multiple spots. So it's like 2 different landing spots before you get to the next cooperative room.
Right.
And so I don't think anybody ever really went down those paths. Maybe one person started to and was like, oh, this is a bad idea. And then you just abandon your pawn that's there because it's like, well, I'm going to waste 2 turns,
kind of slow,
3 turns to get up this path and score no points. Yeah, I'm moving on my own and I get free movements. It gives me flexibility maybe, but I'm never going to get this pawn anywhere that's actually worthwhile to me.
Well, and that's actually the problem, right? Because like, okay, it's free and yeah, you don't get any points, but the problem is where are you going? Are you going into a room that actually has people in it that you could negotiate with that could result in you getting either ahead or getting points?
Right.
Probably not, because if you're going down those paths, usually you're going by yourself. So what's the point of going into a room where you're going to be by yourself, where basically everyone's going to be incentivized not to go there, and now your dude's just stranded, you've wasted a bunch of turns, and no one's going to negotiate with you, and you're not going to score points from that guy.
Yeah.
Like that was the reason that I didn't utilize them.
I mean, I slightly disagree because the outside tracks, seemingly to me, they both end up in 3 senator committees to get you into the main chamber. There's a 5 senator chamber in the middle that I don't think any of us use very much, right? Which I think we kind of all avoided from that very reason.
Yes.
That we need to have all those people in there. But if you go up the single tracks on the side,
The
very outside tracks, you can get a person into that 3-person side senate to be able to vote yourself in.
But it's slow because it's 2 single rooms in a row.
Oh, I totally get.
Yeah, to get 2 people up there via the same track. I mean, you're talking 6 turns, which is an eternity in this game.
I totally get it, but I can see doing it where it's not necessarily advantageous to maybe move something that's already on the board. The rest of the bottom track is filled up, and you put something there. But I mean, to me, I don't know.
I mean, to have a move in your backlog that like other than moving Caesar or something,
right? Because sometimes you can't get a negotiation that you want, or not is not in your favor, kind of thing.
So like, at least I can do that.
I can at least do that.
I thought that, and I see what you're saying, but I almost always found on your turn, it almost always seemed like it was a good idea to be involved in something that allowed you to move forward along a path that gave you points, or let somebody else move forward through negotiation.
That gave you
and score
favor,
points.
right?
Yeah, right.
No,
like the 1-person paths just never seemed to materialize meaningfully in our games.
Yeah,
but
I never played them.
that could be groupthink. I don't know, but I think it's a good point, Jason.
All right.
Final
Move
thoughts?
on to final thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. You want me to start?
Do it.
Go for it.
All right. I think for me, this game really demonstrates how my gaming tastes have changed over the years. So I didn't talk a lot about this in cons because I don't think this necessarily is a con. I think this is more preferential, but I'm going to mention it now. In this game, the deals can get really convoluted and they can get really aggressive because all of the negotiation centers on a single person on their turn, right? And so it can turn into a lot of one-upmanship and, just aggression, right? And there was a time in my gaming career where I really did enjoy that, where I really enjoyed social deduction games, right? That can kind of get aggressive in their dealings. And just feel like as I've been in the hobby longer and I've gotten older, to be honest,
He's ancient.
I just, my energy level for like just being like, no, you should do this instead. It's just kind of like gone down. You know what I mean? But I say that is not Quo Vadis' fault. Okay. Which is why I didn't mention it in cons. That's a Chris problem. I'm just saying all this on the front end just so people understand my score. I think if you like negotiation games, this game is easily a 5. I think it's really strong in negotiation. It's got a lot of interesting things going on. But for me personally, I just don't have the energy to fight with people about making deals. You know what I mean? I just don't really care anymore, right? So
you negotiate with enough kids, you just don't have the energy.
Yeah. Like we were playing some games that started getting really aggressive, and I was like, well, I don't really care. You know what I mean? I just was like, So I was really like on a 3-4 line for this one. I'm actually going to give it a 4 because I think it has so many clever things going on that maybe like in a year, maybe I'll change my mind. People's gaming taste just change over the years, right? But like I said, I was between a 3 and 4. I'm going to give it a 4. If you like negotiation games, I do think this is must play though. I can see why people like it. I see why it's recommended. But for me personally, I'm going to go in the 4 camp for now.
All right.
If that makes sense. All right.
I totally agree with what you said, Chris. I mean, there were several times during the gameplay, I think my superpower is like feeling guilty about things.
But Bill was wheeling and dealing.
I was wheeling and dealing.
That's a funny statement for you to make, considering how many times you backstab people.
I never backstab. The rule is 1 turn.
He backstabbed, but he did feel guilty.
I did.
Okay.
I tossed at least 1 time that night over that. I mean, negotiation games do take a certain level of energy.
They do.
And like you're saying, a certain taste thing. And I absolutely agree. If this is in your wheelhouse, it's an easily 5 and maybe even a 6.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it's just interesting how moving up the stairs to the top Senate just plays out when you're doing these things. But I'm with Chris. I ended up giving it a 4 because I would play it again if people wanted to play it.
Yeah.
But it's just not the kind of game I like a whole lot.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Get it.
Yeah, I think y'all have summed up my thoughts pretty well. I was on the 3-4 line with this one as well, but maybe for a slightly different reason. I am non-confrontational by nature. So like I don't like negotiation games in general. However, the only other like primarily pure negotiation game that I can think of off the top of my head is Chinatown, which is a game we've played a ton, and I'm surprised we didn't mention it.
Yeah, we
now.
should have.
And I really enjoy that game.
I do too.
Despite the negotiation aspect of it. And so if I'm thinking about a negotiation game, I immediately have to compare it to that one.
Yeah.
Because it's such a good negotiation game. And I think for me, I was like, well, would I rather play this or would I rather play Chinatown? And there's just more to think about and more interest to me in a game like Chinatown than there is for this.
Yeah.
And so I still fell on the 4 side of the line on this one because I think it's a good game and I think people should play it if negotiation is your thing. I think if you've played Chinatown and you really enjoy that game, this might not top that one.
Yeah.
And so I fell on a 4 because I think it's a good game.
Yeah.
And I would play it if people wanted to play it. But I think if I had a go-to negotiation game and I had only one on my shelf, it would probably be Chinatown and not this one.
Yeah.
If I had to be honest.
Here's a question for you. If they change the senators to animals in a zoo.
We're getting to that. Hold on.
Quo Vadis. Yeah. That totally changes it for me.
Can I
We
say
did an
one
entire episode on anthropomorphism.
Can I say one quick thing because I'm glad you mentioned Chinatown. I think I prefer Chinatown too. I like the simultaneous negotiation nature of Chinatown. The one thing about Quo Vadis that got me was how everybody was vying for one person, and it just seemed like aggressiveness kind of won out. Where with Chinatown, people over here can be having a conversation about what they want to do, and I can pull Jason aside and be like, "Hey, Jason, what do you think about?" You know what I mean? And so you didn't feel like you were just vying and fighting with people as much in Chinatown, which is, I think, why I prefer it as well. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
All right. So for me, Quo Vadis didn't really excite me. If I'm being really honest with myself, I didn't hate it and I didn't quite feel totally meh about it. But I do think I have to land on a 3 for it because I think ultimately this type of game just really isn't for me. And look, I'm a straight shooter type of person. And while I've done my share of actual serious negotiation, I mean, I've been a part of 6 real estate deals, either buying or selling at this point. One of which was
the worst, man. Don't ever do it again.
Owner, right? Like, I mean, I've done that. I've been to like the guy that has to talk to the other agent, right? But here's the thing. My goal in each of those transactions was, yes, to drive a hard bargain, but also to be fair. That makes sense. Like I was never trying to get more value out of a deal than was right and proper, right? Because that's what you do when you're dealing with real people in real life. This isn't dealing with real people in real life, and you can't negotiate like that in a board game or you'll lose, which is what I did, right? You make reasonable deals in a game like Quo Vadis, and you'll give more points to other people than you get for yourself, usually, right? So I managed to make it to the Senate in each game, but it didn't benefit me.
Right,
so
right.
I think that's what I mean. Is like I think I'm not very well geared for this type of games and really negotiation games in general. Like you mentioned Chinatown. Like I've enjoyed my plays of Chinatown myself, but I never do well.
So you're saying you're not good at stepping on other people in order to get your own gain?
Yeah, basically. I want to come out there and come up with the most reasonable deals for everybody, but that's not what wins games. So this one's getting a 3 for me.
That's interesting. So I think the take-home story here is, if you like negotiation games, we're saying you should definitely play this.
If you're ruthless
but
and heartless. No.
this game just isn't really what our group's looking for, I guess.
I think so.
We're just, it's not a fault to Quo Vadis.
This easily falls into the type of game that I would tend to give like this like bifurcated, number,
the split,
right? Because,
the split rating, right?
I do think that it's well done. Like I actually didn't know this was Reiner Knizia, but now that you mention it, like I totally get it.
Yeah, right.
It has the like hallmarks of just that calibration and finesse that you expect from his games. And I do think this is like high quality, right? Like it's just well designed. But I don't have to like it, right?
Right.
So that's where I'm at. All right. Well, so for those out there who want to check out Quo Vadis, where can you find it?
Yes, so there are copies available at Noble Knight, our sponsors. We want to plug them, so make sure if you want to pick up a copy, you can get it through them. Our discount code, 10% off your order, is Hidden23. That's changed.
New coupon code.
New coupon code changes every quarter, all right?
Only goes into effect after the spring sale.
It does not apply during spells.
Today.
Which ended today. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so you should be able to use it there.
They're before this episode aired, so disregard everything I just said.
We're on top of things. We're so professional. All right, 16 copies on the BGG Marketplace, but we must mention, and it's been alluded to already, this game is getting reprinted as Quo Vadis. Ugh.
Oh man, that was
Anthropomorphism.
not a joke.
Oh no, it was not a joke.
Oh.
Yeah, let's take the Roman theme and slap animals on it. Okay, so that's happening.
I can't believe you guys are cracking on that.
Has anything changed?
It's terrible. There has. That's what I was just pulling up. So there are a few changes. I'm going to read them out to you and see what you guys think about this.
All right.
It has a double-sided game board that supports 3 to 7 players.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Whoa.
That intrigues me.
Yeah.
I think 6 or 7 players would actually introduce a good amount of tension that I think might be good for this game, because the threat of getting locked out becomes very real at that point.
Right.
That's a good change, I think.
Are there still only 5 spots in the Senate?
I think so.
Okay.
That's the sort of thing that would make me throw away all of my ambivalence about being ruthless.
Right.
Yeah, that's interesting. It introduces neutral, bribable figures, which tighten the game board at all player counts. So there are pieces on the board that don't belong to anybody that you can move, I guess.
You could bribe them.
Yes.
Okay.
Interesting. It introduces asymmetrical animal abilities, which increase negotiation possibilities.
Sounds like garbage.
Terrible. Yeah.
I don't know. That has potential.
No, Bill.
Okay. We'll see. That'd be a cheat.
And then it contains a theme and presentation that are more likely to appeal to a wider audience.
Cute, friendly animals.
I do think the 6 and 7 players is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Are you like vying for like a space in the burrow or something
I
like
guess.
that? Like,
Yeah. It's a weird thing. but-
okay.
Yeah. I might pick it up.
All right.
Of course you will. Look around you.
Look around.
Well, those are our thoughts on Quo Vadis.
Oh yeah, that's what we do.
Not Quo Vadis.
Quo Vadis.
All right.
It is the year 1870, and the Northern Pacific is getting ready to lay some track from Minneapolis to the Pacific Ocean. That means that thousands of farmers, miners, ranchers, and lumberjacks will be able to move their goods to the hungry eastern markets. More importantly, it means that there is money to be made by investing in booming railroad towns. It's time to pour money into promising railroad towns and spend time influencing the railroad route. The investor that reaps the most benefit will be crowned the winner.
Nice job, partner.
Northern Pacific. All right. Northern Pacific. Published in 2013. by Rio Grande Games and Winsome.
Mm-hmm.
Designed by Amabel Holland,
Yeah.
one of the co-owners of Hollandspiel,
Yep.
a company that we will talk more about in the future, I think.
For sure. This is episode worthy. Yeah.
She's a designer of Irish and Iberian Gauge,
Yeah.
recent releases, as well as Soo Line, Islet, Field of the Cloth of Gold, and
Yeah.
other Hollandspiel titles. So, interested to dig into more of those at some point in the future. Currently ranked on BGG 2,621. So, as Chris likes to say, quick rules summary for Northern Pacific.
Oh, can I quickly, it's 2 cocktails, quickly mention this game was recommended by James Geist, Dads on a Map, QWERTY Martin, and Branston Original, longtime listeners and supporters, and had 22 thumbs on our geek list.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, Northern Pacific is a game of making investments in various cities in the Northern Pacific, U.S., in an attempt to make a return on those investments if and when the train arrives in those cities. The game is played over 3 rounds. However, each round is identical. So, in essence, you're playing the same short-ish game 3 times in a row. The map is a network of interconnected directional train tracks starting in Minneapolis, weaving from east to west, and branching through various cities along the way, always ending up in Seattle. In each of the 3 rounds, players begin the round with 4 cubes in their player color, 3 small cubes and 1 large cube. The player will also have a reserve of extra cubes off to the side that are not accessible to them yet. Each cube in a player's possession at the end of a round counts as a single point. Whether it's big or small, doesn't matter. So what are we trying to do? On a player's turn, they can do one of 2 things. It's very simple. You either place a cube or you advance the train. That's it. You can't do both. You have to do one or the other. To place a cube, the player can place one of their available cubes, big or small, in any city on the board, except for Minneapolis and Seattle. There is a limit to the total number of cubes that can be in any given city, and this is dependent on the player count. So it's usually 2 or 3 cubes per city. But again, it changes based on player count. However, there are no restrictions on the number of any single player's cubes that can be in a city. So I can have all 3 cubes in a particular city if you want. That might not be a good idea for reasons we'll talk about in a minute, but you can do it. The other option is advancing the train. So to do this, a player places a new train marker on the track, extending the head of the train line as it moves east to west from Minneapolis to Seattle. Remember, though, that the tracks are directional, so these directions have to be followed. And the train track can never branch, so you can't split off and go a different direction. So how do we actually score points in this game? If the train passes through a city where there are cubes, each player that has a cube there takes their cube back and receives a bonus cube from their reserve for each cube that they removed. It's important to note that the large cubes, the reason that these are in the game is that if the train passes through a city where you have a large cube, it grants a bonus of 2 additional cubes instead of just 1. The round ends immediately when the train reaches Seattle. And again, at that point, every cube in a player's possession awards them a single point. Any cubes that are still out on the board don't cost points, but in a sense they do because they're cubes that you should have had in front of you that would have scored you a point. After the train reaches Seattle, the board is cleared completely. Everything is reset. Players reset back to 4 cubes. They're 3 and 1, 3 small, 1 large, and we do the exact same thing 2 more times.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that stays from round to round is the score. And at the end of the 3rd round, the highest score wins the game. And that is entirely how you play Northern Pacific, aside from the tiebreaker that I skipped over.
Easy rules.
All right.
So, unlike Quo Vadis, we actually do have feedback on this game from folks who wrote in their opinions. So Cameron's going to kick us off instead of our traditional lead-in question with some of those opinions.
Yeah. Okay. So for this one, I want to give a big thanks to George W., to Snoozefest, and to Adrian / Adrianos / Zalbar / whatever. So thank you to you guys for submitting your reviews. So from George W., we've got BGG rating 6, Hidden Gems rating 3, He says, the rules are so extremely simple, and yet there is so much game and psychology there. The branching paths seem like they've been thoroughly tested to create interesting choices and chain effects. I can't explain why, but the game totally works. Cons: the board could be clearer, and the setting and components are dry as dirt. It's interesting, but not all that fun. All right. I think that maybe explains his Hidden Gems rating of 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So next up, we've got a review from Snoozefest, our friend.
Yeah, Ravindra.
Check us out over at Discord. Ravindra runs the Discord.
Yep.
So Ravindra says, a game of route building, investing, and speculating, streamlined even more so than Erie Railroad, past the point of interest. Admittedly, only one play of the game, but it just seemed to have stripped away too much of the interesting stuff for me. I'd play it again as a quick filler, but I don't see myself returning to this very often. Fine to get rid of my copy. Okay. And then finally, we've got Adrian / Adrianos Zalbar / whatever. Fast-paced, simple rule set, yet agonizing decisions, with a board that locks up surprisingly fast. Too chaotic with 6 players, best with 4. The game, perhaps due to it being a filler, don't have this staying power for more than about 10 games. Initial rating is a strong 4. Current rating is 3.
Okay.
And for sale.
Okay.
So those are the 3 responses that we got, which is so surprising to me because obviously a game that was voted for for us to review on this episode, it had to have gotten a lot of attention and presumably a lot of thumbs up. But
22 thumbs. That doesn't necessarily mean they liked it. It could mean that they just wanted to hear us talk about it.
Yeah, maybe so.
I think
true.
what it means is they want to torture you guys.
So I think I just expected that any game that would be on this would be generally favored, widely favored by our audience and given the opportunity to share their own opinions.
And
that
it is
maybe,
by some,
that
although
maybe
they didn't comment.
They would have written their reviews. So just pointing that out, we've got a handful of not great, positive reviews. So what do we think about that? Where do we go with this?
Well, so I'll kick us off with discussion. So the last person that wrote the review said that the game is filled with agonizing decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Saw Jason's eyebrow raise at that description. What did you guys think about the decision space here? Find it to be agonizing?
I found it to be calculable.
Right. Okay.
Like, I don't profess to be like a chess champion who can think 15 moves ahead and figure out what everybody's going to do. But it felt like more often than not in this game, you could do a bunch of if-thens in your head.
If-then statements, yeah.
If I do this, then the person right after me is going to do that. And then the person right after them is going to do that. And so this is going to happen. If I do this other thing, then that happens, then that happens, then that happens. And that's okay, I guess, if you enjoy trying to figure out that puzzle. The problem that I stumbled over was that in a lot of cases, I found that I was doing that calculation in my head and coming up with the conclusion that none of the options that were available to me were good ones.
Yeah.
There was no good choice. The game was forcing me to make a decision that was not ideal for me. And I can give a good example of this. And maybe this will explain it. Maybe it will bore everyone. But we played a 5-player game.
It's hard to explain this game. Yeah.
It is hard to explain because everything is it's a perfect information game. There's no unknowns. Everything is known on the board, right? So you can say, well, there's shared incentives, right? You want to get in deals with other people. Yes and no, right? We were in a 5-player game. Bill was the first person to place a cube in a city that was 1 link away from the train.
Right. From the starting space.
Right. So anybody can move the train and get it to this city, or anybody can move the train and move it around this city to where that city cannot be accessible, right? So I'm thinking, okay, well, what are my options on this turn? I have no options. My option is I must move the train, right? Because my son was playing with us, no fault of his. Like, he didn't do anything wrong, but he was between Bill and I. He did something else on the board. He placed a cube somewhere else. So now it's to me. I have the option. I can join in with Bill, right? And then Cameron and Chris come after me, and it goes back to Bill. So in this case, if I join in with Bill, what happens? Cameron can either join in with me. Now we've filled up the city. Now it's 3 things. What is Chris going to do? Chris is going to say, heck no, the train's not going there. He's going to move it somewhere else, right? And bypass all 3 of us. That's a great move for him.
Yeah.
So that means that is not a viable option for me.
Right.
Cameron's other option is he can say, well, screw the 2 of them.
I'll move the train.
Cameron's going to move the train.
Right.
Great. That's still not a good option for me. So my other option is I move the train, right? I have to move the train.
Or can I add one thing? Or you can create a 50-50 scenario. So if it's like a branching pass from Seattle, you could go another direction that Bill went, right? But now you're giving the people after you a choice. Do I pick Bill or do I pick Jason, right?
Who do I like better?
Well,
right. Or I say I avoid all of that and I'm just going to forget all of this mess and I'm going to go someplace else. I'm going to go place where my son just placed.
Way
and join
back
with
on
him.
the board, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not an option either. Because if I do that, guess what's going to happen? Cameron's going to place with Bill. Chris is going to place with Bill. And then Bill's going to move the train to that city and all 3 of them are going to score. So why would I do any of those? I'm not going to do any of those. And so it's just this giant chain of if-thens that ultimately ends up in I have to move the train, which
Right.
hurts me.
Right.
Because now I'm wasting my turn to move the train around the city instead of placing a cube out on the board that could benefit me somewhere. Right.
Yeah.
But it is the only logical move in that situation. Right. And I guess if you're playing this game and it sounds so pretentious, and I don't mean it in that way. But I guess if you're not thinking through all those scenarios,
All the
you could say,
permutations, yeah.
oh man, this is like a super deep decision. What do I do? But if you work it out, like it's not really. And sometimes, I'm not saying every scenario in this game is that way.
Yeah.
There are situations where it's 50-50. I could place this cube here
Right.
and maybe it'll go there, maybe it won't. Or I can place further out and maybe it'll get there, maybe it won't. But so much of that comes down to turn order. And I'm going to stop here for now and let other people talk.
I'm really glad you explained that really
that was,
well.
Yeah,
I
that
think.
was very well
because
done.
I was worried about our ability to explain what you just did in a way that made sense to where we could justify maybe all of our prospective positions. But I think you did a good job. I think one other thing we should mention, because I'm glad you used the example of Bill, because we had played it before Bill had played it with us, and Bill placed in a city adjacent to the starting space, and we just promptly went by him.
Rookie mistake.
Right. Is the way
Which
the
is
point-
another problem.
Yeah, it introduces another problem in that you've got kind of like a long rectangular board, but we kind of felt like
It's a funnel.
you only really play on 1/3 of the board.
Yeah.
The spaces immediately adjacent to the starting city and the spaces immediately adjacent to the ending city don't really come into play. At least they didn't in our games because
Or they shouldn't.
right, because it just didn't make sense for them to. Everything kind of funneled towards the middle, like
Right.
Cameron was saying. Because if you place adjacent to the starting space, you are right, Jason. If you place a train, you're not placing a point. Well, you're not placing a cube that has the potential to score points, but you're denying somebody else not just 1 point, but 2 points, really.
Right.
Bypassing a cube is a 2-point swing, really, because one, that cube they placed is not earning them a point, but had they just left that cube in front of them, it would have earned them a point. So it's like they're really losing 2 points. They're losing the point they already had in front of them, and then they're not scoring an additional cube for it. So it seems like to me that bypassing people is a good play, even if I'm not putting cubes down, because I'm hurting you, right?
Right.
And so putting next to those spots immediately next to the starting space is really risky and dangerous.
That's
and so
right.
everybody was kind of placing in the middle of the board.
Right.
Which is weird.
And it does become a thing of turn order, right? Because if you could say, depending on what the turn order situation is, well, I don't have to be the guy that moves it, but somebody should bypass that guy, that player's
before
cube
it comes back to Bill.
Before it comes back to him, because then he'll be able to capitalize on it, right?
But
So-
if you get far enough through turn order, then everybody can just pile onto that spot, and then the person who placed there in the first place can just do it, which is
That's
my
right.
example, right?
Right.
Right,
So,
yeah.
so there is only a very narrow window there
Sure.
where like you can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree. I mean, we have to bring up the Great Falls situation,
yes.
which is this one spot on the
Right.
board where effectively every route converges.
Yeah.
Every route, I should say, can go through
Right.
Great Falls,
Mhm.
Probably will.
which
Almost certainly will.
Which presented every game that we played with this situation with, okay, begin the game of Northern Pacific. Player 1 places a cube on Great Falls.
Right.
Player 2 places a cube on Great Falls. Player 3 places a cube on Great Falls. Player 4 does something different because Great Falls is
Players
at
1, 2, and
capacity.
3 spend the entire rest of the game making sure the train
Yeah.
goes through Great Falls.
Yeah, basically.
2 players cannot wrestle control away of the railway sufficiently to prevent the train from going through Great Falls.
Right.
It's just impossible.
It's kind of a problem because if that's the preamble to the rest of the game, every game, like that's boring
Yeah.
and problematic for a game. Like who wants the recipe for a game to be like the first 3 turns are the exact same every single time?
And it's maybe 1 or 2 cities on either side of Great Falls come into play in
Yeah.
terms of like, which one's it going to be? Is
Right.
it going to be the north one or the south one on either side of Great Falls? But other than that, none of the other cities on the board matter.
Right.
I
When
would
you
argue.
can say, well, that's not being very creative. It's like, no, because the reality is that like if anybody places on Great Falls, which they will, the 3 out of 4 or the 3 out of 5 players that are sitting on Great Falls will inevitably steer the train back to it.
Yep.
Just makes, and they can because every route on the map will take them there.
Yeah.
Right.
It would take an error by the 3
That's
players to allow the other 2 to somehow bypass it.
Right.
Yeah,
Like
there-
Jason said, if you go through all the if-then statements, everybody, if they're playing optimally, which isn't super hard, I don't think, can ensure that it goes through that space at least, right?
The only strategy I thought I developed that may or may not make sense is that I would look for somebody that was 1 space away from me and put my cube on their city, because that would give another chance of somebody that's a little further away from me to redirect the chain
Sure.
back to my spot. But other than that, because you had to make all these decisions way ahead of the fact of the chain getting there.
Yeah, I think you made a good point. You do want to pay attention to your right and left neighbors and what they're incentivized to do, because the way they're going to bring it, you want to build near them or place near them so that you can capitalize on what you know they want. So
Right.
there's something to think about there.
Mm-hmm.
But it still can't. How do I explain this? Based on that logic, the route kind of builds itself, and then the train progresses through that route with some 50-50 decisions maybe thrown in there, but at higher player counts. I guess we should mention that. But
Right. Maybe if you had 6 or something, you need 3 people in a row that all agree that they're going to bypass Great Falls to get past it. I think in the other cities, you probably need 2 for the most part. And if you can get your partnerships so that there's never really 2 people in a row that's going to want to miss your city,
right.
that's kind of the strategy.
Yeah.
I think that was my other con, is that it feels like the only opportunities for creative play in this game are heavily turn order sequenced, right? It's like, well, if it just so happens that the way the cubes fall, I can get me and the next person all in a row, and we can all affect some sort of change on the board all in a row, then that's fine. But if somebody who's not part of that partnership falls in that turn order, like, you just can't do it.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
I think one thing that's probably important to point out about this game is that maybe not everybody's group is like our group. I feel like one thing that this group tends to fall into is try to play optimally if you can. And maybe there are groups out there that just don't do that. They've people in their groups that are not as well versed in games. They're not going to logic out every possible permutation. And maybe this game is a whole lot more fun if you're not doing that. If you have people that are just like, I'm just going to go there, you know?
Right.
I don't know. Because obviously this game has a following,
It does.
right? And so I don't want to just completely discount that on the basis of our specific experience with it.
I think one more thing we need to mention too before we get into our final thoughts is maybe the idea of the big cubes was to mix up this kind of thinking process that we're going through. But even still with the big cubes, I guess the point of the big cubes is it will make you think twice about traveling through a city where you thought you for sure wanted to go, right? Because it's like, well, I'm in this city, but if I go in this one, Chris is going to get 2 points and I'm only going to get 1 and Cameron's going to get 1. So maybe we should reconsider that. But the problem with that is, yeah, you're denying me too, but you're also shooting yourself in the foot. Right. And it felt like to me that oftentimes that was a bad idea to do that, to deny that person the 2, even though you were just getting 1, because the games were usually pretty tight. It's a low scoring game. Right. And most people usually get their big cube. So like, yeah, you denied me from getting my big cube, but now you've lost a point that you probably needed. And it's still probably going to go through Jason's big cube and Bill's big. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just don't know if it changed the game enough to really matter. And to be honest, I feel like if you play that way, you're probably going to lose anyways, right?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know. It just didn't add enough for me, but I don't know what y'all thought about the big cubes, if it really helped.
It added in that slight wrinkle, I think, as you mentioned, right? But I think I even tried in one game. I was like, you know what? It's going through Chris's big cube, and even though my cube's in there, I'm just going to deny it, and I'm going to direct the train in a different direction.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't help me, right? Felt good in the moment.
Yeah, it did. It made me mad. Anyways, we're getting in the weeds here.
I have one more thing that bugs me so much about this game. Nothing changes from round to round. You just do the same thing 3 times. Nothing carries over, nothing builds, nothing progresses.
Except for your score.
Right. You run the track, you score the points, you clear the board, you do it 2 more times. That's boring. Sorry. I'm just going to say it straight out. Like, you need something that gives you a feeling of progress or a feeling that the last round mattered somehow other than the number of points that you have. Otherwise, why don't we just play 1 round of this game and play a different game?
Mm-hmm. In my mind, when I read the rules, I thought, oh, okay, well, whoever's in the lead, we're less incentivized to go through that person's spaces in future rounds because they're in the lead, but I still never felt like the game played out that way.
No, it only matters.
That's what should happen, but yeah.
It only matters where, because you're saying, okay, whoever's in, like Chris is leading after the first round, and wherever turn order works out, you're the first or second person to put your dude on Great Falls. And because let's be honest, that's what's happening. And then what are we going to, the third person is like, well, Chris is leading, so I'm not going to put my cube on Great Falls. No. Like, you see what I mean? If that's the one thing that's different from round to round, like, that's weak sauce. All right, I'm done.
All right, final thoughts. Here we go.
This will be fun.
Bill, you get to start.
Oh, dang it. I don't have good fleshed out thoughts. Yeah, I mean, as I think we've kind of beat this dead horse, there just wasn't a lot of creative thinking or decision making from my point of view in each turn. I might differ a little bit with you on there and Cameron. In the 3 rounds, I could see there being games where it is kind of a learning process of learning the strategy and or trying to do something to affect the leader and or to catch up, even though you're doing the same thing. But this game didn't give you really a mechanism to do that, because I think there was one of the games where you were way out in the head and there was no strategy that I felt like that we could implement at the table to help catch us up. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I'm going to give this game a 2.
All right.
Well, like I mentioned, I guess the one thing that this game has going for it, which we didn't talk about, is that it presents itself as being a super elegant masterpiece of a rule set.
Simple
like Spectaculum rules, or like any of those other games, right? Super simple, super deep decisions. Unfortunately, it became far too much of like a if this then that mental exercise, where more often than not, the result of that calculation was like either an obvious, it would be dumb not to do this move, or an equally obvious but much less fun, would be dumb not to take this defensive move type thing.
Or I can put myself in a 50-50 situation and hope I get picked.
Right. So I looked up some other reviews of this game just to see, like, are we missing something important here? And I read one by BGG user Deleted. I guess that's his name. And he says, comparisons with Quandary are inevitable. I've not played Quandary.
Yeah, you have. That's Wildlife Safari.
Ah, okay. Well, there we go. He says, but imperfect information makes that game shine, whereas the perfect information here dulls the finish with a Brillo pad slog of calculation. For me, playing Northern Pacific reminded me most of playing Mancala. Overall, mentally tiring with little payoff. And I felt like that summed up my thoughts on this pretty well. Maybe there are deeper strategies here of the shared incentives and stuff that we're just not finding, but I feel like most of them are locked really tightly to turn order.
Yeah.
So like even if I'm like, okay, well, we're all going to team up and we're going to go against Cameron. If Cameron is between me and you in turn order, it doesn't matter because he's just going to jump in on whatever we start anyway. So if I wanted to play an interesting shared incentive train game, there are many others out there, and I would rather play those. So I gave this a 2 as well.
All right. I'm just going to say it right now. I won this game twice. Okay. So what I'm saying is about as pure of a game review as I can offer. This game sucks. It doesn't build up or progress through the game. There's no arc to this game except for the path from the train that inevitably runs from Minneapolis through Great Falls to Seattle.
You can make it an arc if you go north and then go south.
Yeah. You might think that you can be clever and experimental in this game, but you can't. If you go off the rails to try something, your opponents will pass you by and you'll lose out. I'm always afraid of falling into some type of like groupthink, but I honestly can't see how that could be the case with this one. If someone puts themselves out there on a spot early, it just makes sense to move the train in opposite direction, right? If someone places a spot on Great Falls or somewhere beyond that, it makes sense to join in. Like,
right.
I mean, we've smashed this one into the ground, and I hate to do it on an episode like this because I think what we like to see is that we've connected with this audience who have voted on games, and they've put this one out there as one that they want to hear from us about. And I assume that there are folks out there that really like it, right? So I don't like smashing on your game, right?
Release the hate mail.
But this one's bad. It's a bad game. It's a 2.
Well, if we could say anything, we can't be accused of pandering to our base after this, right? So, if anything,
what base? We don't have a base anymore.
Right, our dwindling base.
I'm gonna leave the form up, and honestly, if you're out there and you're just like the Hidden Gems guys just completely missed it on this one, they don't understand. Seriously, like write us an email, write us on the forum or whatever, write us on Discord or BGG, and like tell us what we're missing because we honestly like racked our brains to just be like, we shouldn't just dump on this, right?
Oh yeah, I played this many
but we don't
times.
have a choice. We have to give you our honest opinions.
We call balls and strikes here at Hidden Gems, okay? That's what we're learning here. All right. I won't be long here. I'll try not to be. So there are games, this is interesting. I've experienced this phenomenon several times where you read the rule book and you're like, this game is going to suck. And it actually ends up being a pretty good game. You know, like Montage or Esselsbrücke would be good examples of that. And there are times when you read the rule book and you're like, this sounds so cool. And then you play the game and you're like, what happened? That's this game. I read the rule book and I was like, I saw what they were trying to do. And I thought I knew how it would play out. I was like, I can see what they're trying to do here. And it sounds interesting. But when it ultimately played out, the shared incentives it didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to play a good game with meaningful shared incentives, just play Marrakesh. Honestly, like I just don't see any reason why I would ever choose this game. It's just not good. I didn't enjoy it. It's not fun. You can say that the Hidden Gem guys are just idiots and we weren't getting it. Maybe. I don't know. I consider us to be pretty seasoned gamers. I will say, however, I played this game a lot. I at least played it with 5 other people that are not represented in this room. And when we played it, I was very careful not to bias them. I didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
It was good. It was bad. I was like, hey, I just want to try this game with you all. Nobody I played this game with liked it. Not one person.
Wow.
So that's
5
at least
others.
9 or 10 people. Not one person in our group, of which there are many experienced gamers, like this game. So take that for what it's worth. All we can give is our opinion, but I can tell you it landed horribly in our group. Just didn't like it.
We'll say, and I buy all your crap games, and I don't think I want
and 2
I'm
out
giving
of
it a 2, by the way, in case I wasn't clear. Yeah.
And 2 out of the 3, I believe, of the folks that wrote in said they were getting rid of their
Yeah,
copy.
it was pretty milquetoast for the most part, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's a weird one.
So, all right.
Okay, well, if you're still listening, there are no copies available at Noble Knight, but there are 5 copies on the BGG Marketplace. But I will say, this game was pretty recently reprinted by Rio Grande, so I think it is probably, I don't know, pretty widely available, like Amazon and other online retailers. I think you can get it if you want to try it out. Test our theories, go for it, but that's all I got to say.
Well, those are our thoughts on Northern Pacific. Moving on.
Let's go.
Several miles west of the African mainland lies the Cape Verde island of Santiago. The climate is hot and every drop of water is precious. The players are landowners bidding for plantations with specific crops on them: bananas, sugarcane, potatoes, beans, or red peppers, and try to connect them into the large plantations. These plantations must quickly be connected to the canal irrigation system, or else they will dry up and produce no yield. To ensure that the new canals connect your own plantation to the irrigation system, you have to bribe the current canal overseer. The sooner that a plantation is irrigated and is connected to other plantations of the same type, the more yield, and thus the more money, will be gained at the end of the game. The player who acquires, irrigates, and connects his plantations most effectively will win the game.
Now that you've offended all New Zealanders out there for no good reason, because this game takes place in Africa, we can move on with the rules there.
Just like saying connected.
Connected in the peppers.
I believe I said it 6 or 7 times.
Oh, man. Whew. It's good to be back.
Explain the rules.
Missed this in my life. All right. Santiago, published in 2003 by Amigo and Z-Man Games. At the time of this recording, its BGG ranking is 850.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Inside the 1K.
Inside the 1K, baby. Designers of this game, Claudia Healy, who has no other notable designs, and Roman Pellick, who is notable for one design, Shanghaian.
Oh,
wow.
Who's
Which
also
Jason
seen
and I
this podcast.
We reviewed.
Not super favorably, if I remember.
Yeah, I think you gave it a 4. I gave it a 3. It's fine.
A great flavor text, though.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
That's right. That was
Let's not remind
what
ourselves
was
of
that?
that.
That was the
Arr.
the infamous Captain something.
Let's not remind ourselves of that. Moving on.
Yeah, moving on. All right. So this game was recommended by JB Roots, Ultimo Ratio, Ghidorah, Born, Torre Larson, Ethan Reyes, and also received 23 thumbs on BGG. Pretty highly recommended there. All right. Brief rule summary for Santiago. This isn't too brief. I'm sorry, but I think this needs to be covered. Santiago is a tight area control auction game where the players are vying to control the most valuable crops within a tightly confined board space. Bill is asleep. The game board in Santiago is made up of a 6x8 square grid upon which players will be acquiring and placing one of 5 different types of square crop tiles. Did you get that, Bill?
I did.
Okay. The game board is further partitioned into 2x2 groups with dark lines running in between these groupings and along the outermost edges of the board. These dark lines are canal lines where blue irrigation sticks can be placed in order to irrigate placed crop tiles. During setup, a blue spring token will be placed at one of the intersections of these canals, and this is where all water begins to start the game. Before we go into the rules, it's important to first understand how scoring occurs. At the end of the game, each player will look at each crop tile or connected series of crop tiles where they have at least one yield marker, or you could think of this as like a control marker, and they will score a number of points equal to the number of yield markers present in that area multiplied by the number of crop tiles that make up that area. So let me give you an example. Let's say we're considering peppers. Peppers. And let's say we've got 5 tiles that share sides orthogonally in some way. So you've got a glob of 5 connected pepper tiles, and within that glob, you have 3 control or yield markers. You would score 3 times 5, 15 points at the end of the game. If you had 5 yield markers in there, you'd score 5 times 5, 25 points. To this total, the players will then add the remaining cash on hand, and the player with the highest total wins the game. The game will take place over 9 or 11 rounds, depending on the number of players playing the game, with each round progressing through 7 different phases. Let's go through those phases now. Phase 1. Players will randomly flip over 4 or 5 crop tiles, depending on player count, which will be up for auction that round. It's important to understand that the auction is a once-around auction, and that the auction always starts to the left of the player who controls the canal overseer. That's very important, and we'll talk about that more later. Players can make any single bid they want, with the exception that a player cannot match a previous player's bid except for passing. Multiple people can pass, otherwise you can't match a bid. In Phase 2, once the bidding is complete, the player that bid the lowest amount in the auction immediately takes the canal overseer token. If more than one person passed, the player that passed first becomes the canal overseer. In Phase 3, the players then take and place one of the face-up auctioned crop tiles onto the board in order from highest bid to lowest bid. The crop tile can be placed anywhere they want, but it's important to note that each crop tile will have either 1 or 2 farmers printed on it. This determines how many yield markers the player gets to place on the crop tile when they add it to the board. Interestingly and importantly, if a player passed this round, they must place 1 fewer yield marker on their chosen crop tile. All bids are then placed into the bank and out of circulation. During Phase 4, irrigation occurs, but not without bribes. Irrigation is important because for every round that a crop tile does not share an edge with an irrigation stick, that crop will lose a yield marker. Now, starting to the left of the canal overseer, each player will attempt to bribe the canal overseer with money to get him or her to place the irrigation stick to go where they want it to go. Different bribes or suggestions can be made by the different players at the table, and different players can combine their bribe into one larger bribe if they want the irrigation stick to go in the same place. Once it comes around to the canal overseer, they must either accept one of the cash bribes and place the stick in the appropriate place, or they can still place the stick in a place of their choosing, but they must exceed the highest bid on the table by at least $1. All unaccepted bribes are reclaimed by the respective players. It's important to note that during Phase 5, the players have the opportunity to perform an extra irrigation. Each player starts the game with 1 spare irrigation stick. Once during the game, each player has the option to irrigate a canal if the irrigation didn't go the way they wanted in the current round. However, this extra irrigation opportunity occurs clockwise from the canal overseer, and if someone chooses to use their extra irrigation, nobody else can play their extra irrigation stick that round. Next, in Phase 6, drying occurs, where all unirrigated crop tiles lose one of their yield markers, as I explained earlier. If drying removes a tile's last yield cube, this tile flips over and becomes desert, no longer contributing to that crop's multiplier. Finally, in Phase 7, each player gets $3 from the bank to help replenish his or her funds. It's so much money. And then the game ends once all tiles have been auctioned. At this point, any unirrigated tiles, regardless of whether they have yield markers on them or not, flip over and become desert. Now players total their scores, with highest score winning the game. Woo! Wake up, Jason.
Wow.
All right. And that's generally how you play Santiago. The reason why I went over all those rules
That was very thorough.
is because there's a lot of important things in there that we should talk about.
Yep.
But first, let's see what the people have to say about
right.
Santiago.
You give me crap for being too thorough.
Well, hey man, listen, sometimes you got to.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read comments. If
Mhm.
you want to jump in at any point,
Mm-hmm.
just give me the signal.
Okay.
You can jump in. And
What's the signal?
And we'll chat. Just
Raise my hand.
raise a hand, or just say a word 3 or 4 times.
Code word. Okay.
Throw something at Jason.
Code phrase, Alvin's hot juice box. See if anybody gets that reference. All right.
So from George W. And I hope that we're saying that right, because we've mentioned him a couple times
Yeah,
here.
George
He's
without the E.
George without the E. It may be Jorg.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
So sorry, Jorg or George. Thank you for contributing. BGG rating 6.5. HG rating 3.
Oh, okay.
Pros The once around auctions are very tense, and the difference between, for example, third and fourth place can be huge. So every coin matters. Okay. I like the idea of the Canal Overseer that losing the bid can be a good thing, not only for turn order next turn, but also for being bribed.
Okay, stop.
Okay.
This must be discussed.
Okay.
Yeah, this is a great place to start. I'm glad that he made that point. I think the importance of the Canal Overseer cannot be overstated, and I appreciated this more and more as I played the game. The Canal Overseer is interesting in that you're intentionally putting yourself in a bad position from a tile-taking standpoint. So you're going to get the worst tile that's up for auction, right?
Right.
And potentially, if you passed a worthless tile.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good point. So if you pass, like I mentioned in the rules, you have to put one less yield marker on the tile. So if you end up with a tile that had one farmer on it, that tile is not going to directly benefit you from a point standpoint, although you could still use it strategically. We'll talk about that more later. But the benefit is you get the Canal Overseer, which means you're likely going to get money. Money is tight in this game. So you've navigated yourself in a position to where you can get more income. But even more importantly than that, in my opinion, you will be last to bid in the next round.
Yep.
Which is hugely important in this game. If you feel like there may be a tile upcoming that you really want to be able to acquire and knowing what you need to beat, right? I think is very strong.
Yeah.
And an interesting game decision. And I'm so glad, and I'll stop talking, but I definitely wanted to talk about this. I love that he made passing have a small penalty associated with it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise people will be passing like crazy in this game.
I think it's balanced. It's a very balanced feature of the game because it doesn't as easily run the risk of like the thing and slough off where you're like, if you can be the slougher, you should be type of thing. So you do want to make a calculated choice to pass to be the Canal Overseer.
Right.
It's a good point. Any other thoughts? I'll continue reading.
No?
Well, no, I mean, this comes down to strategy because I bid one a lot because I wanted the worker on it.
Because you didn't want to lose the cube, yeah.
Exactly, didn't want to lose the cube. But I found that the timing on choosing that was just, I don't know. I enjoyed that kind of angsty part of this game.
Jason's saving his thunder thoughts here.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, I was going to mention the one potential con to that, which I think is a con primarily for you, Chris. I didn't want to steal your thunder on that.
No.
But was that you can set yourself up for that and then end up disappointed.
Yes.
If what comes out on the draw, which is random, right?
Happened to me many times.
Is not beneficial to you, right?
Yeah.
So you've just intentionally hurt yourself in order to potentially gain later, only to find out that a random draw doesn't really benefit you much.
Hurt.
Right?
Yeah.
I agree with that.
But on the other hand, sometimes it really does work out.
It's true.
And if it can, then you've probably put yourself in a really strong position in the game.
Yeah.
So George also says, I like that you always have the option of your personal canal and that you can use it offensively as well.
Yes.
And I think that's a great point too, because that's always the big question in the game, right? It's like, when do you use it? You know? Because there's also the risk that someone could use theirs before you, depending on turn order, and then you can't use yours because only one can be used per round. It's an interesting question, right? Do you want it to just secure something that you think that you'll need immediately, maybe early on in the game, or do you wait for some crucial moment later on where it's going to make a big difference for you?
Yeah.
But that you don't know what that's going to be.
I almost always found that I wished I had it later in the game when those globs get really big for big points. But the longer you hold it, if other people are doing the same, the more risk you're running that you might not ever get to play it in a meaningful way. So there is some angst there.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's funny he said using it offensively or defensively. I mean, wonder what he means by the difference between those two.
Yeah, seems like it would always
defensively would be like using it for yourself when you've gotten squeezed out of the water auction. Offensively, I guess, is you're either placing it in a way that directs people to start putting tiles away from something that somebody else wants.
Yeah, maybe.
Or you're placing so that someone else can't place that round when they really need to, right?
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Because only one person per round can do that.
Sure.
So if I'm before you in turn order and I know you really need to place yours, I mean, that'd be pretty costly to me to just place it out there just so you can't.
Right.
Unless it also benefits me.
But it is an option.
But it is an option. Yeah.
He says cons, like many player-driven economies, it's fragile in that a player not playing to win can really mess up the game for other players.
That's any game. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he says turn order matters a great deal, and I can feel like an unfair disadvantage to sit to the left or right of the canal overseer.
Okay.
Or even depending on the flop for the round, you decide to be canal overseer. Which is kind of what we're.
I want to
This is a
say
very
something
important
about
point.
this. Yeah, if somebody at the table is really being aggressive about grabbing the canal overseer a lot because they like to be last in the next auction, that really hurts the person to their left.
Yeah.
Because being first sucks.
It's terrible. Yeah.
It sucks, right? So if you're to the right of a person like that, you're gonna have a bad time.
You're just like, seriously, come on, bro.
Yeah.
Well, even outside of that, I found it's an interesting mechanic that the first and last are being determined simultaneously on a once around auction, right? In one sense, that's a crazy problem to try to solve in your head.
Right.
And like it adds an interesting wrinkle to the strategy of bidding in an auction. But at the same time, you can get screwed in that you can be like, well, this is an awesome auction for me. I'm going to bid really high because I really want that tile. But when you do that, you have no idea who's going to be the overseer at that point, right? Because anybody could just bid low or pass and become the overseer. And depending on who that is, you could be screwed in the water auction,
Yeah,
right?
you might
Like,
not get that tile watered, yeah.
yeah, I could be like, well, I bid high and I got this awesome tile, but Chris ended up being the overseer, which I didn't have any control over. And maybe I could have foreseen that, but probably not.
Yeah.
And if that happens, and that happens to be a situation where I know that everyone else is going to team up to make the water go away from where I need it to go, me bidding high actually hurt me a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Way more than another scenario. And that plus the fact of the kind of the short circuiting the overseer auction bid, which we haven't talked about yet, but we probably should at some point, that can really hurt you in that. Okay, well, I guess we have to talk about it now. In the overseer auction for the water,
Yeah, we should talk about this.
I can say, well, I bid a lot on this tile, right?
Yeah.
That was really good for me. So I can prepare ahead of time and make sure that I can bid really high to make sure the water goes where I want it to go, right?
Right.
But you can't do that. You can't assure that because Bill can come in and say, well, I'll pay $1 to give you a different option,
Yeah.
right?
I'll,
And the overseer
Yeah.
can take that option.
I
They
like
don't,
this,
They don't
actually.
have to take the high bid, right? And that's a cool mechanic, but it also makes trying to go hard after a particular bid in order to get something that's really beneficial to you, if the overseer situation comes out against your favor, really risky and pretty much impossible to overcome. There's no way to like set up for it so that I can say, well, I'm guaranteed. that the water-
Unless, as Bill mentioned before, there's an open spot that's already irrigated, or you plan to use your extra irrigation stick. I
Right.
totally get what you're saying, but
I-
I
and
personally,
you
Here's the
can
thing.
mitigate it. for
I
sure.
liked that you could bribe the canal overseer and be like, let's say Cameron and Jason are like, hey, the two of us together, $6, send this way, which is really tempting because that's a lot of money. But I could be like, hey, man, I'll give you $2 if you just send it this way and we can screw both of them over. I kind of liked that,
That's
to be
kind
honest.
of this game, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I thought that was fun, honestly.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's an all bad
it's
thing
not- you're
because
saying
I
it's
like
not
it too,
necessarily
but
con?
it's not necessarily a con, but it can be really painful
Yeah.
if you end up in that situation and there wasn't really much you could do about it.
Mhm.
Right.
Now, see, here's the thing, though. I think that this actually plays into something that I actually really like about this game, which is I think single bid auctions are really fascinating
Yeah.
games, right? I mean, I know we're
Oh, yeah.
eventually going to make the comparison to Medici, so I'm going to be the person that actually does it.
Good job, Cameron.
Woo! Because I love Medici. And I
Yeah.
think it's great. And I think that the best decision that you have to make in that game and this one is what's the number, right? It's your turn. You only get one shot. You can't change your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And your turn order is like
Makes all the difference.
is like a gift to you or a curse, depending on what it is, right? So it's like, this is my chance to set the tone for whoever's after me, right?
Yeah.
That's the game, right? It's like, pick the correct number. So maybe you're in a position where you can spend a lot of money. Maybe you've been saving up your money and like, good for you. You could also blow all of it on one turn and it completely just
Game over.
evaporate,
Yeah.
right? it could be a good round for you, but you could have massively overbid.
Yeah.
Okay, because we've all done it. I think each of us have it done on at least one round where you're like, "This is my round. I'm dropping large coin on this one,"
Mm-hmm.
and then you're like 7, and then everyone else is like 2, 1, 3, and you're like, "Really?"
Or you could have a round where you're in first position and the bids have mostly been going 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, and you're like, I bid 11, and then Bill's like, I bid 12, and you're like, I'm effed.
Yeah, and you're just like, because you don't
Game over.
because you still any
That's how I
amount
won
that
the first
you
game.
bid, it's important to clarify any amount that you bid during the round, it's gone. You're
Yeah.
spending that money. You're committing it. It's not if someone goes over you, then you're out scot free. No, your money is gone.
Yeah.
So if someone overbids you when you've taken a big swing, that hurts
Yeah.
a lot
It hurts.
because those are points.
And you might say, well, don't bid high when you're in first seat like that. And I agree with that. But that goes back to what Jason and I were saying. It hurts to pass or bid low to go in a low position, and then the tiles don't come out you need when you want it to bid high. And then you're in a bad seat position again. You're like, well, I have to make a move sometime, right?
Right.
And then you go for it and somebody bids over you and you're like, oh, boy.
Well, and if you
a
shortchange
killer.
yourself on cash, and you, especially later in the game when people have been able to save up a little bit, and you're suddenly in a position where your max bid is like 4, that's awful. That's a painful position to be in this game.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the last couple of rounds, 2 or 3 rounds, sometimes it could be a 20-point difference on which tile you get, like you're saying.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Huge points.
Right.
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 If you tap into a big plantation with a 2-pointer, it can easily be 20 points.
Easy.
And if you get the second tile out there instead of the first one, I mean, yeah, that's a game changer.
Yep, for sure.
Any thoughts, Jason, before we move on?
No,
So
I'm good.
we have a lot of reviews on these, so I'm going to include more of our our
I
audience
promise I won't
comments.
stop unless it's something really important.
Okay, fair enough. No, that was a good segment though. All right, so this one is from Vince. Thanks for writing in, Vince. He says, Santiago is this amazingly wonderful entangled game. Finding ways to incentivize others to do what helps you, seeing alliances form and fall apart, bribing and being outbid, makes this an amazing experience every time. This game has rapidly climbed into my top 20 and will probably climb some more.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
This is some more positive feedback from
Yep.
Vince. All right. Taylor says, Chinatown is the Beatles of interactive central board auction games. While-
Chinatown?
He said Chinatown.
Okay.
I'm just reading it.
Okay.
Chinatown is the, let me read it. Chinatown is the Beatles of interactive central board auction games, while Santiago is the Rolling Stones. With the prestige of being the second Aaliyah title and reprinted several times in the last 20 years, Chinatown is an elegant classic with a few scoring flaws. Meanwhile, Santiago's system is a little grittier, a little meaner, and has rarely been reprinted, but suffers from no scoring or other notable issue I can think of. Chinatown may get the esteem, but Santiago has gamer cred and, quote, if you know, you know.
Can't always get what's
Nice.
All right.
You try sometimes.
Any thoughts on that and the comparison
No.
with Chinatown?
I like it. That's a good metaphor.
I did not think about Chinatown when we played this game at all. Did you?
Yeah, I'm having a hard
Doesn't
time connecting
remind
this to
me.
Chinatown.
Nothing. I mean, I get what he's saying, but I thought more about Chinatown when we played Quo Vadis than Santiago, honestly.
Because of the kind of pure negotiation
The negotiation
element.
aspect,
Yeah.
yeah.
I guess there's negotiation in the sense that you're bidding for
There it is,
the
yeah.
water and trying to convince other people to make the. But you can force that more through the game mechanics than you can in Chinatown or Quo Vadis.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
But we got some positive feedback there
Yep.
for Santiago, especially, I guess, saying it suffers from no scoring issues.
Okay.
Okay. All right. And then we've got Marco,
Oh, yeah.
who
Mhm.
says Santiago demands that other players are ruthless with one another from the outset.
Yeah.
Your partnerships last as long as the current turn and are immediately forgotten afterwards. The balance of liquid cash against points will lead to squabbles over canal placement and who becomes the canal overseer. If you think modern art is too friendly, then come down to Santiago.
I like that. Okay.
Yeah, I think that point about the partnership's only lasting as long as the current turn is a good point.
Yeah, I do too.
I definitely felt that in this one.
Mm-hmm.
And the forcing players to be mean from the outset.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
I feel like maybe this is the time we
Yeah,
talk
we
about
should
our,
talk about
our
it now.
experience with playing on the,
The edge of the board.
So we challenged ourselves at one point where we're like, are we all good with this? Everyone's going to be friends.
Yeah.
And we put the fountain starting point of the water on the edge of the map, like right in the middle on the edge. And then we played from there. And would we say it made a difference?
And then we weren't friends anymore.
Oh, exactly.
Before the game started, we were like, oh yeah, we should do it for the podcast. Oh, it'll be fine. We'll have fun.
Like
and by
turn two,
turn
just
two, we're
like,
everybody's like, I hate you,
Right.
you're a jerk.
Yeah, I think in the second round, Chris had already dry plotted me in. I'm like,
Yeah.
my
Oh no, that was the one where I was like, okay, it's turn 3, and I'm like, I think I'm out of this game. I think I'm done.
Yeah, I could. So actually, this will segue into one thing I did want to mention. I do feel like taking tiles not with the intention to score, but with the intention to block
Right.
is an interesting strategy, and it
Yeah.
very much comes into play if you decide to play on the edge and, God forbid, in the corner, which you can do. But passing, while it is true that you get one less cube on it, you could pass to try to get into the canal overseer position with the intention of, I'm going to take this tile knowing it's not going to score for me. I'm just going to bottle you up.
Right.
And I actually kind of enjoyed that, honestly. You know, I mean, I like it a little meaner anyways,
Yeah.
but just taking somebody's point potential and being like, well, you know, those 2 crop tiles you got 4 cubes in, they ain't getting any bigger because
Right.
I'm blocking you in.
Yeah,
right?
and
you can
that's-
do that in this game.
Right. That's an important thing to note for those unfamiliar with the game, which is that the individual plots of different crops score separately. Right.
Right.
So you could, for example, have 2 separate locations of beans or whatever
Right.
that score separate from one another. Right. So if they're not connected, then they don't score as one big blob. So if you can cut them off somehow and you have 2 bananas over here and 5 bananas over there, you can do that, and,
Yep.
that divides it out. So you're incentivized, if you're not part of one of those crop plantations, to cut them off if you can, to minimize the number of points that your opponents are
Right.
going to score.
And if the spring starts on the edge, you're just cutting your real estate in half, basically. So it's just a lot harder to expand and not get closed in and to get watered. And it's just a different experience.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
sure.
whenever you have multipliers like that affecting the score outcome, if you can prevent those ramps from happening when you're not a part of them, you probably want to.
Right.
All right, and so finally, from our audience reviews, we've got Christane, who's a patron.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good to hear from you. He says the combination of shared knowledge with the uncertainty of the human factor makes this game great. Having shared incentives with the overseer at the right moment is key. For some, it is difficult to grasp that you better not pay more than half of your own yield as a bribe.
Yeah.
It can be frustrating if other players are overpaying, which can result in lengthy discussions. I tend to like this, but I can understand it won't be for everyone. Biggest negative is that you can't always go for overseer when he's powerful. Theme may not be the most exciting, but overall superb game, parenthesis 5 to 6 category.
Nice. Okay. Cool. All right. Before we get into final thoughts, since it wasn't mentioned in the comments, I just want to mention one more thing because I really enjoyed this part of it, and I'll be brief. I loved how the economy was handled in this game.
The
Since
income?
yeah, since it wasn't mentioned in the comments. In games like this, typically, they often struggle with a runaway leader issue. And that, like, if somebody gets off to a good start, quote unquote, and gets a big plantation and is scoring a lot of points, they're generating more income. That's not like a thing in this game. It doesn't matter how well you're doing from a point standpoint, you're still only getting $3 a round. So you'll never find yourself in a position of like, well, I just can't do anymore because they're making more money than I am. Everybody makes the same money every round.
Yeah.
And the only thing that changes that is how patient you are and how much you're holding back.
Right.
And then when you navigate yourself into the canal overseer role to take bribes. And that's it. And I really, really, really liked that.
Yeah.
Because it always felt like you had a chance to make a move because somebody wasn't making more money than you. Everybody kind of had the same money. It was just how you were using it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. in my opinion.
No, completely agree with that. I had notes written down about how highly I think of that because, yeah, like the if you're playing the game well, then it means you're making good deals, you're bidding correctly, you're
Bidding
not
appropriately,
you're not
yeah.
just flooding your money out there to try to get what you want. And yeah, and you're placing yourself strategically in a place where you can gain more income through other means.
Yep. All right. We ready? Jason, final thoughts
man,
on
you're gonna
Santiago. You're first.
You're going to make me start.
You want to go last?
Maybe.
All right, Cameron, you start. I know Jason.
Okay.
Jason is still making up his mind over there. I can tell.
Yeah.
This is a tough one.
It's a tough one.
I don't mind going for it. All right. I got to play this one several times, and I have to say it surprised me.
Mm.
My one con, which I didn't mention, is this game looks terrible.
Yeah.
You look at the board, it's like literally brown with a bunch of lines on it.
Uh-huh.
Like that's it. And also, why do they include $50 bills? There's a bunch of Monopoly money in this game to track your money and track your points, and no one is ever going to need $50
It's to make you
bills.
feel bad, Cameron.
Yeah, I always feel like I'm underperforming.
It's a
in this
big
one.
stack of 50s.
Yeah. But honestly, I had to say it surprised me. It grew on me with every play, and I think I probably got 3, maybe 4 plays in of this one. Even in the last game where I kind of got piled on in the beginning, where we were playing on the edge of the map.
Oh, yeah.
Looking back,
You recovered, actually.
I still felt in the game toward the end that I
Yeah.
wasn't that far behind.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really well balanced game, and that the designer really thought through all the potential hazards that you could encounter with it. So my opinions really changed from my very first plays of this to where I'm actually now kind of looking forward to playing it again.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I'm actually going to land on a 4.
Nice.
I think this is a well balanced game. I like single bid games.
Yeah.
I like the format, and it was enjoyable.
Awesome. For me, I think from a design standpoint, this game is something of a masterpiece, to be quite honest. Every rule makes sense. There's no unnecessary fluff. The decisions are agonizing. The game can be super sharp, and it punishes poor planning. All things that I like. So this kind of sounds like a 6, but I'm not going to give it a 6. I'm going to give it a 5. And the only reason for that is, and I mentioned this briefly towards the beginning of our review, there is a bit of a luck element here in that tile flip, and it burned me quite a few times. I'm not saying I can't handle any sort of luck in my game, but I guess the point I'm making is this a game that I'm always going to go for to want to play all the time? Probably not, just because I had a couple experiences where I just got really torched on that tile flip, and it hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not to say that I don't think the game is excellent, because I do. I'm making a distinction here between 5 and a 6, basically. For me, it's not a 6, but I think it's well above average. From a design standpoint, I really kind of marvel at it. There's just so many neat rules that we've hashed out that I don't want to go into again, but I think it's just really well done. So for me, there's a mosquito just went in my mouth.
Oh, gross.
It just went right down my mouth.
That's awesome.
It literally sucked into my mouth as I was talking.
Oh, gross.
It's okay. I'm going to give this game a 5, Bill.
Are you out? Need some water?
I'm good, man. It went down kind of clean, actually. I'm all right now. It's caught me off guard. All right.
North Carolina springtime.
Holy cow. All right.
So I think I have to talk a little bit more about the 2 different auctions and the water seer, because it was so interesting to me staring at those tiles, thinking about what I'm going to bid for, especially if there's already been bids ahead of me and somebody's either passed or bidding a 1 already, and I know who's gonna be the water seer, and where I have to think about where I think their water's gonna go, and then the tiles have 1 or 2 possible workers you can put on it. So if you have 2 workers on all of them, you can pass and still have a tile that can count.
At least one.
At least one. Or you can bid 1 and know that you're going to have a 2-person tile out there, I guess, kind of thing. The wrinkle for me was when there was a couple of 1s out there. And how do I bid this in a way? Because it really cranked up the incentive to bid higher and not be one of the ones to get the one worker placement tile.
Yeah.
And I just really, really like that tension. And at the same time, I hated it as well because I felt so much of it was out
No
of my
warm
control.
fuzzies in this game.
No warm fuzzies. And playing in this group, I mean, it's like
It was Cutthroat City.
Yes, it was. Yeah, you walked out bleeding. You can get your feelings hurt in this game.
Oh,
Especially,
yeah.
When you were on the wrong side of the 8 ball and like you bid a bunch of money out and you lost the negotiation on where the water goes and you're like watching the thing that you just bid $8 for drying up out there in the field.
You got locked in a couple of times
I
with
did
tile
get locked in.
placements.
Oh,
Yeah.
Chris absolutely.
I
did that.
orchestrated that.
It was like, okay.
I was like, if you place here and I place here,
right.
he's trapped in.
I had
We used to
visions
do
of this great, huge banana orchard. I was calling Dole already. But anyway, to me, I just wonder how I feel about negotiation games from what you said earlier about some of the other ones we've talked about tonight. That it's just become stressful kind of thing. But I'm going to give this a 5 as well.
Woo.
And really, it's because, and I have it written right here, you can look. I just think the design is really clever.
Yeah.
And there's so much about balancing the water and your bids as you're going into it that it's an amazing thing to behold, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing because this really kind of is the sort of classic hidden gems DNA,
Yeah.
right? Simple rules, like pretty tough decisions and strategy and stuff.
That is something else I was going to. Sometimes you can read the rules of games that come across pretty easy, like it's an easy game, but the strategy is so deep on the backside of it that it's so difficult to us to convey in a podcast or verbal sort of way. This game had lots of rules to it, but really it's a pretty simple rule set. I think it becomes on a game.
The
night.
rules are intuitive.
Right,
Mhm.
they're absolutely intuitive. So
Yeah.
that's one of the other
Mhm.
positives I would say about this game.
It's easy to learn.
Very easy to learn, very easy to get in on a game night. So
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo a lot of the thoughts that have already been said in terms of the elegance of this game. I think the design is really fascinating. I've never seen an auction game. I'm sure some exist, but I've never seen one where there's such a dichotomy between the incentive to bid high and the incentive to bid low,
Yeah.
which is fascinating to me. At the same time, I'm a little torn as to like, it also creates some complications, right? It means I can't determine what's going to happen quite as well. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. We've talked about perfect information games in Northern Pacific and how that can also go wrong, right? So I don't believe that every game needs to be perfect information in order to be good.
Agree.
But I think I struggled with that dichotomy, both in a good way and in a bad way. And so it shouldn't be any surprise to anybody if you've listened to this podcast for a while that Medici is one of my favorite games. And once around auctions, I think are an underutilized and fascinating game mechanic that I wish was used in more games. And so I was really debating between a 4 and a 5 on this game. I think the elegance really shines. I just question if there was like a little bit of the special sauce for me that was missing, because at the end of the day, and we've talked about this in the past on other games, I have to think about like amongst all the games that I would want to play, especially auction games, is this the one that I would be like, yeah, man, Santiago, that's the number one that I want to go to. I don't think it is, right? That definitely keeps it from being a 6 for me. On the 4 and 5 line, I'm back and forth. I don't know. I think I'm going to settle on a 4 for now. I think it is a good game. I think it can be a great game. And I would want to play it a little bit more to decide for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely think it's a good game. I definitely think it's an interesting example of the once around mechanic in auctions. I want to play it more.
Yeah.
So that's a positive sign.
That's
right?
good,
I
'cause I do
think,
too.
I think it could go up to a 5 with
Yeah.
time.
Well, I'm just glad that we all had a game that we all liked pretty well
Yeah.
among these.
Love to explore this
especially
more.
after the last one. Sorry if you're out there and we're really hoping for some positive words about Northern Pacific, but maybe try Santiago.
Yeah,
and,
man.
And if you do, maybe Chris could tell you where to find it.
Good news, bad news. Bad news, there are no copies at Noble Night. There are
Okay.
only 2 copies on BGG, and they're kind of expensive, but that's because this game's way out of print. But
Oh,
it's got reprinted
oh boy.
by Treffer.
Okay.
It's a Polish
Truffle.
company. So it's not easily available in the States right now, but I did hear that you can pick it up through Board Game Bliss, which is a Canadian distributor. So there is a North American distributor if you live in the States, where you can probably get it through them. In Europe, it shouldn't be as hard to get, but they did just reprint it. It looks a lot better than this version.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, from an aesthetic standpoint.
I'd be very curious just to see it.
But apparently the rules are unchanged, which
Cool.
thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because they don't need to be changed.
Right.
They're perfect as is. You don't
That's
need
right.
to change anything.
You don't have to. Board game designers and distributors, you don't have to change stuff if you get reprint rates.
Yeah.
Just if it's
Just let it
worthy
be.
of being reprinted, maybe just reprint it.
Yeah. It's good.
Dress up the artwork a little bit.
Even despite my quibbles with maybe the luckiness of the top flips, I wouldn't want them to change it. I don't think, because I don't know how they could, and it's okay. Like,
Yeah.
It just didn't go my way that time. It's annoying, but so many good things about it. It doesn't need to be messed with.
Awesome.
All right. Where we at? What's our time?
7
3 hours and 50 minutes. Not lying. Almost
What
4
time
hours
is
of
it?
footage here. Almost
It's
one.
12:41 Eastern, people. Can't say that we're not committed. We still got a backstage to do. Get ready.
Oh my gosh. Forgot about that. All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Santiago.
Right.
Well, thank you for joining us on this 50th episode, milestone upon milestone
Woohoo!
episode of Hidden Gems.
Yes.
Get excited, Bill.
Guys,
Bill is
we're-
not happy to be here right now.
I've already missed out on my milk and cookies.
Guys, we're so thankful. We wouldn't be doing 50 episodes of this show if we didn't have an audience out there who was enjoying the show and constantly giving us wonderful feedback. We're grateful that you tune into this podcast and listen to us jabber on about video games and board games and everything else. So thank you for being a member of our audience. Thank you for being a patron if you're a patron. If you are, you can, of course, tune in to the latest episode of Hidden Gems Backstage. And if you're not, maybe this is a good time to check it out. You could just head on over there. $2 a month gets you access to the Backstage podcast.
Right. We're talking about Wiz
Direct
War.
access to us. There's more fun stuff. We've got an upcoming Gem Miner episode. If you want to jump into that category, you can get us to review a game that you choose. So lots of fun stuff happening over at Patreon. Of course, you can follow us on our social media platforms, Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. We don't really post a ton lately, but
No.
we're still there. If you want to find us, if you want to chat with us, you can find us there. You can jump in on Discord, chat with us there, chat with other members of the audience. And of course, you can jump in on the BGG Guild if you want to interact with us and share a game that you think is a hidden gem. And of course, if you're so inclined, you can consider supporting the show over at patreon.com Hidden Gems Podcast, or by purchasing a Hidden Gems t-shirt or a hat over at our website, hiddengemsboardgamepodcast.com/store. Until next time, I'm your host, Cameron.
This is Chris.
I'm Jason.
This is Bill.
Thanks for listening. This episode of Hidden Gems, number 50, was recorded in Raleigh, North Carolina on May 22nd, 2023. Do you feel like the games featured on Hidden Gems aren't hidden enough for you? Well, if that's you, be sure to join us in 3 weeks as we review 3 games so hidden they won't even have a BGG ranking. Hidden Gems is produced and edited by Chris Alley, Cameron Lockey, and Jason Yanchuleff. Our Board Game Geek Guild is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Ghidorah. Our Discord channel is monitored and managed by honorary Hidden Gems team member Snoozefest. Our show's logo was illustrated by designer and artist Caitlin Nieto. Check out her work on Instagram at It's Caitlin Nieto. We would love to hear from you. Feel free to join the discussion on our many social media accounts. You can find us on Facebook at Hidden Gems Board Game Podcast, Instagram at hiddengems.podcast, and Twitter at Hidden Gems Board. Disagree with one of our reviews? Have something you want to say about one of the games we discussed today? You can also make your voice heard on our Board Game Geek Guild at boardgamegeek.com, guild number 3874. Once again, thank you for joining us on Hidden Gems, and until next time, fellow gem seekers, enjoy your games and enjoy your search.